Chapter 724. Because Lu Yi was involved in the headless case of the imperial envoy, he became the scapegoat for Prince Ning. Not only did he cause Consort Xian to fall out of favor in the palace, the worst part was that she was expelled from Anling City by an imperial edict and had no chance of becoming the emperor. In the palace, Yu Shu had seen Consort Xian and received benefits from her. While she was disgusted by Lu Yi, who had once tried to encroach on her, she also felt a bit of pity. But now, seeing his extremely poor face and how he wanted to take someone's life as soon as he opened his mouth, she felt that he deserved to end up like this. She looked around and saw panic on a few familiar faces. She sighed in her heart. You know better than me how people die. It's impossible for me to compensate you with a life. At most, I'll pay for a coffin and ask someone to arrange their funeral. I'm sorry, but I can't do anything more than that. Yu Shu did not intend to fall out with Lu Yi, but she also would not show her fear. She rejected Lu Yi's excessive request and turned around to say to Lin Fu, "Go, withdraw 200 taels of silver from the account and give it to 11th Master." Lu Yi was furious and jumped up from his chair. 200 taels of silver, do you think you are sending a beggar away? Yu Shu sneered, it is enough to buy a good cypress coffin. Lu Yi did not see her begging for mercy as he expected and was instead ridiculed. He angrily kicked over a nearby chair and pointed at Yu Shu's nose. Let me tell you, if you do not take out 200,000 taels of silver today, I will sue you thieves for plotting to harm the Tian family. I will let all of you die. Yu Shu frowned. Lu Yi could not stand being tricked and was exposed in just a few words. She knew that he took the risk to make this scene not just to vent his anger but to get money. She found it a little strange. Even if Lu Yi's mother's family, the Lu family, had been hurt because of his uncle Lu Buwan's case, the Lu family was still one of the 12 prefecture's aristocratic families. Why would Lu Yi be short of money and need to come to the Wangji Tower to extort money? Since she couldn't figure it out, she decided to keep it for later. What troubled her now was that 200,000 taels of silver was a huge sum of money. Even she didn't have this much money. If she wanted Wangji Tower to compensate her with this huge sum of money, she probably wouldn't be able to come up with it in a short time. Even if she could, she wouldn't hand over Shui Rui's belongings. Shui Rui wasn't around. His territory and his people should be protected by her. If she couldn't even do this, why was she worthy of his love? 200,000? Yu Shu pointed at the dead person on the ground and mocked Lu Yi. I didn't ask in detail where this esteemed guest came from. Could it be that he is a relative of the imperial family that needs a golden body after his death? One of Lu Yi's companions blurted out, that is our 11th Master's little brother. Isn't he a relative of the imperial family? 100,000 taels of silver is too little for you. Little girl, if you know what's good for you, obediently hand over the money. Don't make us brothers angry. When we deal with you later, you won't be able to cry even if you want to. This kind of vulgar words entered their ears, causing the faces of everyone on Yu Shu's side to change. What kind of status did Yu Shu have? In the past, even if it was Prince Jing Lu Tan, he would have to politely call her Lianfang Gunyang when he came. They didn't know where Lu Yi found this ruffian that dared to say such vulgar words to dirty her ears. He really deserved to die. Gui Lu and Gui Qi wanted to rush out to teach this grandson a lesson but were quickly held back by Lin Fu, who secretly shook his head at them. Yu Shu suddenly heard these words. Even if she had been through hundreds of battles and was immune to poison as a female, she would still have a weakness. Looking at the little ruffian who was baring his teeth and smiling lewdly, she was so angry that she trembled. Her eyes suddenly became as cold as the snow of the 12th lunar month. Impudent! Lu Hong and Su Qing shouted. Seeing that Yu Shu was being humiliated, they were about to step forward to teach her a lesson when they saw Lu Yi suddenly turn around and give that lewd face a big slap. Did this Yi ask you to speak? Everyone was shocked at first, but when they heard Lu Yi's next words, a sentence ran out in their hearts. Birds of a feather flocked together. This little girl was first seen by this Yi. If you want to let her be happy, this Yi has to do it first. Is it your turn? After saying that, he turned his head and stared at Yu Shu, narrowed his eyes and licked his lips. Suddenly he changed his mind. If you don't want to pay, fine. As long as you are willing to accompany me tonight, I will not pursue this matter. Yu Shu lowered her head in silence. Just when everyone thought that she was going to explode, she raised her head expressionlessly and asked him, Do you mean what you say? Lu Yi sneered. If I want to deceive you, then let me die without descendants. All right, then let's go. She then said to Lin Fu and the rest. Don't worry, I will be back soon. Yu Shu straightened her back and turned around to leave. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment and called out to her. Hey, where are you going? Yushu turned around and looked at him coldly. Didn't you say that I should go with you? Then let's go. No matter where you go, I will accompany you to the end. Lu Yi's eyes widened in surprise and joy as he watched Yushu disappear. Fearing that she would regret it, he hurriedly chased after her. Lu Hong and Su Qing looked at each other and gritted their teeth as they followed. Their companions looked at each other in dismay. After a while, they carried the dead man on their shoulders and ran away in a hurry. The diners who stayed to watch the show did not expect such an ending. They sighed for a while and then left. When the place was empty, Gui Lu and Gui Qi could not bear it anymore and shook off Lin Fu's hand. Gui Lu angrily said, "Old Lin, why did you stop us just now? Didn't you see that the girl was coaxed by them? No, I have to chase after her. If something happens to her, how am I going to explain it to the young master?" Little six. Lin Fu hugged him tightly and said with a crying face, "Do you think I want the girl to go with them? If I were alone, I would have fought with them. But don't you see who it is? It's the 11th prince. Even if the emperor doesn't like him, he's still a living ancestor. If he doesn't care about his face, if we do, we'll lose our lives. Young master isn't here and the Shui family is in such a big trouble. Who can protect us? If the 11th prince really insists that we tried to poison him, all the people in the Wanji building will die. You don't want to live, but what about little Qing, little Dai, and Gong Erlang and his wife? Little Bai is pregnant. Do they also want to live? The girl, she left with them to protect us." Gui Lu's body trembled and froze. Little Dai and little Qing directly hugged each other and cried bitterly. The cook Xiuqing had always been strong, but now she secretly wiped her tears and said sadly, "The young master has only left for half a month, and there are already villains who bully us. If the Shui family really falls one day, what should we do?" No matter how strong one's fist was, it couldn't be more powerful than wealth. They all had extraordinary backgrounds and unique skills. Just because they were born lowly, without a noble to shelter them, they would be trampled on. "Don't cry," Lin Fu comforted everyone with red eyes. "The girl is powerful. She won't let anyone take advantage of her. We will wait here for her to come back. Old Lin, will say that if something happens to the girl, I will compensate her with my life and avenge her when I become a ghost." Lin Fu persuaded the two impulsive waiters. At this time the restaurant was in a mess, but they didn't have the mood to clean it up. It was already midnight and no one was hungry. They moved to the bottom of the building, casually vacated a few benches and sat at the door looking outside. At this time, a slender figure suddenly walked in from outside. When he saw the group of people waiting inside, he stopped for a moment. Under the light, a slight smile appeared on his thin face. "You all know that I am coming back, so you are all waiting here?" Everyone was in a daze for a moment and then someone shouted, "Young master!" Little Qing and little Dai were the first to rush over and kneel at the feet of the person, crying, "Young master, quickly save the girl has been taken away." The person who returned late at night was Shui Rui, who rushed back overnight. The two little girls' words were incoherent, and they cried miserably. Shui Rui was confused, but he felt something was wrong. He turned and asked Lin Fu, "What happened? Who was taken away? Was it Ashu?" Lin Fu also knelt down and said with an ashamed face, "Miss Lianfeng left with the 11th prince." "What?" Shui Rui's voice suddenly became fierce. Lin Fu didn't dare to hide anything and he quickly explained what happened. In the evening, the 11th prince secretly came to the restaurant with some people. One of them died mysteriously and he blamed it on us. This lowly one couldn't do anything, so he asked someone to invite the girl over to help him. The 11th prince opened his mouth and demanded us to pay 200,000 taels of silver. Otherwise, he would report us to the authorities and accuse us of murdering the emperor. The girl didn't agree, so the 11th prince forced her to leave with him. He said that as long as the girl was willing to spend a night with him, he would let us go. They even humiliated the girl and said a lot of dirty things. Little Dai rubbed her eyes and interrupted. The girl endured it all, and in the end she left with them without saying a word. It was all because of us. Gui Lu was ashamed. "Why are you still talking about this? Young master, quickly take Gui Lu and Gui Qi to chase after them. I think the 11th prince has evil intentions towards the girl. If we're too late, I'm afraid." The cook Xiuqing looked at Shui Rui's dark eyes and didn't dare to continue. Crack. A light sound came from his joints. The veins on Shui Rui's forehead were bulging. He turned around and disappeared in front of everyone like the wind. The sound of hooves neighing came from the street, making people's throats tighten. "Young master, wait, we'll go too." The two waiters were about to follow, but a figure appeared in front of them and lightly blocked their chests. "There's no need for you, I'm enough." Only now did they notice that there was another unfamiliar man that came in with Shui Rui earlier. This person's features were mediocre, and he was around the age of 30. He wasn't tall and seemed to be slightly frail, but the force of his push forcefully caused Gui Lu and Gui Qi, who were both martial artists, to be unable to move, and it seemed as if the person before them wasn't a person but a mountain. Jin Ku blocked them and didn't say much before leaving. Chapter 725. Whoa. Go. Shui Rui swung his horsewhip forcefully and swiftly passed through the streets that were wet after the rain. Splashes of mud bloomed under the horses' hooves and splashed onto the bodies of a few drunkards who were out for a night stroll, causing them to curse. Jinka quickly caught up with him and was half a horse's length behind him. With the wind whistling in his ears, he shouted at him in a low voice, "Little brother, don't panic. We've been riding for a day and this horse can't take your abuse. Besides, where are you going to find people?" Shui Rui looked ahead and turned a deaf ear to Shui Rui, and then he lowered his shoulders and dashed swiftly towards a certain direction. The horse beneath him was truly pitiful. Its legs were trembling, yet it didn't dare slow down under Shui Rui's fierce urging, and it could only wail sorrowfully as it sprinted madly. Jin Ku had no choice but to follow him. They passed through half of Anling City and came to a side street of Songyang. He could vaguely see two lights in front of him and there seemed to be shadows under the lights. Shui Rui galloped forward for a few feet and suddenly stopped. He turned over and jumped down. There was a mansion in front of them. The door was closed and there was no one guarding it. However, there were two people hesitating in front of the door and they were very anxious. Shui Rui strode forward and grabbed one of them and asked, "Where is your master?" Lu Hong suddenly came back to his senses and looked at the person in the dark. He recognized Shui Rui and felt as if he had seen his savior. He didn't have time to be curious about where he came from and hurriedly told him that they had followed Lu Yi's carriage here and lost Yu Shu. They saw a light outside the door and suspected that Lu Yi and the others had entered the house. They didn't dare to open the door and just paced around outside the door. "Master Shui, do you know where this is?" Shui Rui looked up at the lintel of the door and gripped the whip tightly. His palm was wet and sticky. As it turned out, this was the guest house that Lu Yi stayed in outside the palace. He was not an adult prince, so he did not have the right to be conferred the title of king. In a fit of anger, Emperor Zhao Qing had chased him out of the capital. He could not return to the palace, so the number of places he could stay in the capital could be counted on one hand. The reason why Shui Rui was able to find this place was because he knew that Lu Yi was with Yu Shu and would not wander around outside. Lu Yi was a pervert at such a young age. The most despicable thing was that he was arrogant and overbearing. No one knew how many girls he had harmed. If it wasn't for his identity as a prince, no one dared to offend him. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him the number one pervert in Anling City. Needless to say, it was easy to guess why he brought Yu Shu here. "How long have you been chasing me?" His voice was low and hoarse, as if he was desperately trying to suppress some kind of emotion. "A long time." Lu Hong looked at the frightening expression on Shui Rui's face and couldn't help but take a small step back. Shui Rui turned to Jin Ku and said, "Do me a favor. Climb over the wall and open the door. Do not disturb the people inside." This was the residence of a prince after all. The outer courtyard walls that had been carefully repaired were more than 2 zhang high. There were caltrops buried at the top of the wall. Even those with excellent lightness skills would find it difficult to climb. But to Jin Ku it was a small matter. He nodded in agreement and retreated without hesitation. Then, under the astonished gazes of Lu Hong and Su Qing, he opened his arms and soared into the sky like a swallow, easily leaping over the high wall and disappearing without a trace. A moment later, the door in front of them creaked open. Shui Rui flashed inside. Lu Hong and Su Qing looked at each other, gritted their teeth and followed in. However, Lu Yi did not have good intentions in bringing Yu Shu back to his residence impatiently. This person, the more he couldn't get what he wanted, the more he couldn't forget. He still remembered half a year ago when he sneaked into the guest room where Yu Shu was resting and was beaten up. Since then it became a sore point. He didn't know how many times he secretly swore that he would get her sooner or later. Now that he had the opportunity today, he threw his original plan of blackmailing to the back of his head and only wanted a moment of pleasure. Lu Yi's evil nature was not concealed at all. Yu Shu also saw it. If it was in the past, she would have shed all pretense of cordiality to teach this pervert a lesson. But he hit her soft spot by a stroke of luck. In order to protect the people of Wangji Tower, she could only swallow her anger, beat him at his own game and tricked him to leave. So now she had entered the wolf's den and became a dish on Lu Yi's plate. On this side, Lu Yi brought Yu Shu to a room filled with incense and asked someone to guard the door. When he turned around, he revealed his true colors. He looked at Yushu's tall and well-proportioned figure and snorted, "Since you dare to follow me, you must know what I want from you. Since you dared to follow me here, you must know what I want from you. To tell you the truth, I have seen countless people and have seen all kinds of beauties. Your face can't be considered beautiful, but your muscles and bones are well-proportioned, your hips are high, your legs are long, and your lower body is strong. You are one in a million. I can tell with one look that when a woman like you is on the bed, you will definitely be ecstatic and very enjoyable. Even if I don't have that 100,000 taels of silver, it is not a loss for me to exchange for your first night." Yushu listened to his lewd words. She was so disgusted that she wished she could slap him to death. But in order to protect herself, her expression was cold. When he came near and reached out to grab her, she cleverly stepped sideways to avoid him. She covered her nose with one hand and said in disgust, "What's the smell on your body? Stinks." Louis stopped and lifted his sleeve to sniff himself. A sour and fishy smell assailed his nose, like leftovers from the previous night. His expression became distorted. He looked at Yushu and hesitated. His obsession with cleanliness made him clench his teeth and walk out. "I don't know which bastard vomited on the stairs. I stepped on it when I went out. Wait for me, I will go and wash it." Louis left and ordered the guards to keep an eye on Yushu. They closed the door and windows so tightly that not even a fly or a mosquito could fly out. Yushu sat alone under the lamp. She did not intend to open the window. She sent Louis away not to make a last-ditch struggle, but to quietly think about how to escape later. At least Louis was right about one thing. She dared to follow him because she knew what he was thinking. However, that pervert did not know her character and thought that she was a weak woman who could be bullied at will. She sneered silently and touched her bosom to make sure that the thing was still there. She had a plan in her mind. Not long after, Louis came back. She did not know how he took a shower, but his hair was still wet. He wore a cloak outside and took it off as soon as he entered the room. He was only wearing an apricot yellow undergarment. The thin material made it obvious that he was not wearing anything inside. Yushu felt disgusted, so she fixed her eyes on his face and did not pay attention to anything else. Louis saw her sitting there with a cold and arrogant expression. Her clothes were neat and tidy. He could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva and his breathing became heavier. "You are so untactful. I have already washed up. Why don't you wait on the bed? Do you want me to carry you over?" "If they come, let me." He stepped forward and stretched out his arms. He wanted to hug her, but before he could touch the corner of Yushu's clothes, she threw something out and slapped it on his face. "See." Louis sucked in a breath of cold air. He caught it and held it in his hand. He raised his head and fiercely glared at Yushu, scolding, "You want to refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit?" Yushu crossed her arms and raised her chin. "Look at the thing in your hand first. It is not too late to decide whether I want to drink a toast or forfeit." Louis heard this and looked down. He saw that he was holding the weapon that Yushu had used to hit him. It was a wooden booklet with a ginger yellow lacquer cover. There were two small characters written in crane script on the upper left, Kuan, at the top and booklet, at the bottom. Kuan booklet? Louis frowned and raised the item in his hand. He disdainfully said, "I thought you had a trump card. Is this it?" "Idiot." Yushu's lips moved. She didn't wait for Louis to become angry because of her scolding and continued, "You only care about your own free and easy life. Did you forget that there is a suffering mother in the palace?" Today was a coincidence. She had gone to the Princess Fu to find Jing Chen to stamp his seal and had brought the Kuan booklet with her. As soon as she returned to the Fu, she heard that something had happened at Wangji Lu. She didn't stay for long and directly went there. Louis had asked her to accompany him for a night. She remembered that she had this item on her, so she beat him at his own game. She first tricked him into leaving Wangji Lu and then found an opportunity to escape. Louis was blinded by lust, but he wasn't stupid. He heard the meaning behind Yushu's words and put away his lustful expression. In a deep voice he asked, "What do you mean? You don't understand? Fine, I'll be more direct. The item in your hand is next month's Kuan booklet. I don't need to explain to you what the Kuan booklet is. Did you forget that I am an adjutant at the Kuan-Ling Bureau? Daozi Jing Chen is the right commander? He is absent all day and all matters, big and small, are handled by me. This Kuan booklet was drafted by me alone." She watched as Lu Yi's expression gradually became serious and smiled. "Speaking of which, I once entered the palace to see Consort Xian. Because she treated me gently and amiably, I didn't harm her in the past few months. I even arranged for her bedtime to be between a few unfavored consorts so that the emperor wouldn't be annoyed. The The Kuan booklet in your hand is not sealed. It still has the official seal of the right commander. You can take a look to see if I'm lying. Lu Yi opened the Kuan booklet with a dark expression. As expected, his birth mother consort Xian had bedtime for 2 days and was surrounded by unremarkable consorts and beauties. When he flipped to the last page, it was impressively stamped with a large seal. This Kuan booklet was originally to be sent to the palace bureau tomorrow to be delivered to the empress. However, I've changed my mind. I feel that it's better to draft a new one. Your Highness, what do you think? You're threatening me? Louis raised his voice and glared angrily. Yes, I'm threatening you. Yu Shu wasn't afraid of him. If he turned hostile, she wouldn't be courteous. She jumped up from her chair and strode in front of him. She snatched the booklet from his hand and raised her head. Her eyes looked down at him and she was even more imposing than him. She raised the Kuan booklet high up and said with a face full of malice, "If you dare to touch even a finger of mine today, I will draft a new Kuan booklet tomorrow and arrange 2 more good days for Consort Xian to enjoy the treatment of a favored consort. Who knows, the emperor might, in a fit of anger, grant her the grace to leave the palace to accompany you." A consort that had already fallen out of favor, suddenly enjoying the treatment of a favored consort, would only attract the emperor's disgust. The Lu family was already suspected by the emperor. Without Consort Xian as a shield, when the day came when the Lu family collapsed, there wouldn't even be a chance to plead for mercy. Yu Shu's words could not be clearer. Lu Yi's heart trembled as he listened. When he looked at the woman in front of him again, the fire that had been burning earlier had been extinguished by a bucket of cold water. How could he have any lustful thoughts? All that was left was anger and a fear that he didn't want to admit. I've already said everything that needs to be said. Tell me, should I drink a toast or drink a forfeit? Yu Shu took the thin booklet and patted Lu Yi's shoulder. Her pats were neither light nor heavy, and there was a hint of mockery and humiliation in them. It was as if she was lecturing an ignorant fool. Lu Yi was furious, but he didn't dare to say anything. He held back his anger and his face turned red. He grabbed Yu Shu's wrist and trembled with anger. I let you go now. What will you do? Yu Shu coldly smiled. If you let me go, it means that you still have some humanity in you. You still have filial piety in your heart. Naturally, I won't make things difficult for Consort Xian. Lu Yi gritted his teeth and pulled back his arm. He pulled Yu Shu in front of his face and lowered his head to get closer to her. He fiercely threatened, "If I find out that you don't keep your word, I have ways to kill you." Yu Shu frowned and raised a hand to push him away. She didn't expect that Lu Yi would hold her so tightly that she couldn't break free. Instead, under his strength, his collar opened to the sides, revealing his white arms. Right at this moment, a loud sound came from behind them. With a boom, the two of them turned their heads and stared dumbfoundedly at the door that had been kicked open. A foot stretched in, then retracted, and with another boom, the 2 doors fell to the ground with a loud crash. Wood shavings flew and a layer of dust rose. A figure strode in and went straight for Yu Shu and Lu Yi, who were pulling each other. Before they could see who it was, Lu Yi was sent flying with a slap. He screamed and fell to the ground. Chapter 726. Yu Shu knew that Shui Rui would definitely return to the capital, but she did not expect that they would meet under such circumstances. Even though her heart ached, she could not restrain herself from grabbing his arm, which was placed on her shoulder. "Big brother, you're back." Shui Rui lowered his head to look at her. When he broke down the door, he saw Lu Yi's disheveled clothes clinging onto her. In a moment of anger, he did not even think before making a move. Seeing that she was safe and sound, he heaved a sigh of relief. His eyes reddened from the lingering fear. He squeezed her shoulder tightly and said in a low voice, "It's all my fault, causing you to suffer." She had an unyielding personality, but because of him she had to suffer the oppression of others. She was a lone woman and had to take the risk to run into a wolf's den. Yu Shu shook her head. She didn't feel wronged, nor would she complain about Shui Rui. It couldn't be any better that she was able to see him safe and sound, so she patted his back and consoled him. "I'm fine, it's good that you've returned." Lu Yi lay sprawled on the ground. After recovering from the pain, he opened his eyes and saw the culprit's back facing him, hugging Yu Shu. The two of them were not intimate at all and did not place him in their eyes at all. Immediately, he spat out a mouthful of blood and shouted, "Where did this dog thief come from? Where did this bastard come from? Guards, catch him for me. Guards, come quickly." However, no one came to his rescue even after he shouted until his throat was hoarse. Shui Rui turned around and pushed Yu Shu behind him. He coldly looked at the naked 11th prince on the ground and said, "Lu Yi, you sent people to assassinate the imperial envoy. His Majesty has already banished you from the capital, but you did not repent and disobeyed the imperial edict to enter the capital. The lights in the room dimmed. Only then did Louis recognize Shui Rui. At first he was startled, then strangely shouted, "How could it be you? Didn't you flee to escape punishment?" The Shui family was in trouble, followed by the disappearance of Shui Rui. There were rumors in the capital that eldest young Master Shui had fled to seek refuge. Louis took Shui Rui's words for granted. He had shouted for a long time, but there was no response. His subordinates must have been dealt with by someone else. Louis couldn't help but misunderstand. In the blink of an eye, his expression changed. He pointed at Shui Rui and stammered, You traitor, could it be that you want to take me hostage?" Sneering, Yu Shu looked at the frightened Louis, hating him for thinking of sullying her. She coldly said, "What's the point of holding you hostage? Wouldn't it be better to just kill you?" Shui Rui nodded expressionlessly. "Since he saw me, why don't we just kill him?" Louis's eyes widened. He looked like a chicken that had its neck strangled. His face turned green. He actually took their joke seriously and was scared half to death. His prestige as a prince was completely gone. Yu Shu was about to say a few more words to scare him when Shui Rui walked forward and pulled Louis up from the ground. His slender and powerful fingers spread open and ruthlessly strangled Louis's neck. She jumped in fright and quickly rushed forward. "Big brother, what are you doing?" Shui Rui didn't speak, yet he tightened his grip even more, causing Louis's expression to instantly turn purplish-green. He tried to struggle, yet because of the sudden and swift feeling of suffocation, his entire body was powerless and his head was dizzy. Terror that blotted out the heavens and the earth assaulted him as he faced the two pitch-black eyes. Yu Shu saw that Louis's eyes were rolling back from Shui Rui's grip and hurriedly grabbed his hand. "Don't. Let go. Let go. Let go. Don't be so anxious." Shui Rui turned his head to glance at her before he released his grip. Louis fell limply onto the ground and burped. He held onto his neck as he gasped for air. After that, he started coughing and his entire body was bent over. Seeing him like this, Yu Shu couldn't help but vent her anger. She waited for him to catch his breath, then kicked his waist and scolded, "Despicable, lowly thing, you deserve to be killed." Taking advantage of the fact that Shui Rui left the capital to extort money from Wang Ji Loft, he sent a few hoodlums to humiliate her in public. Previously, she swallowed her anger in silence in order to escape unscathed. Now that Shui Rui was back, she naturally didn't have to endure it anymore. Louis was scared out of his wits by Shui Rui's grip and thought that he was really going to kill him. Thus he stopped trying to be brave and stammered, Don't kill me." "Cough cough, I beg you," Shui Rui coldly said, "If I don't kill you today, will you seek revenge on me in the future?" No. Louis choked and shook his head violently. The moment he opened his mouth, he felt a stinging pain. However, he had to say it. "I can swear that I will never seek revenge on you." Shui Rui turned to look at Yu Shu. "You decide whether to kill him or not." Yu Shu did not take his words seriously. She only thought that he was still trying to scare Louis. She had vented her hatred, but she was still a little worried. It would have been fine if Shui Rui did not come tonight, but now that he was here, Louis would make wild guesses. If they turned around, Louis might cause trouble again and accuse Shui Rui of plotting to kill him, a prince. She thought for a while and still had some things to clarify. She asked Louis, "Tell me first. Today you came to Wang Ji Loft to create trouble. The first thing you asked for was 200,000 taels of silver. Why, Your Highness, are you in need of money?" "I'll talk." Louis felt that his life was hanging by a thread. In order to survive, he didn't care about his face anymore. Previously he was a big bad wolf, but now he was as obedient as a rabbit. Just as Yu Shu guessed, Louis was really in need of money. A few months ago he was chased out of the capital by an imperial edict. After a few days of peace, he couldn't stand the lonely days in the Taoist temple. He sneaked into the capital and enjoyed himself for a few days before returning to the Taoist temple. At first he was afraid that someone would report him to the emperor. But after a few times his courage grew. He went to the brothels and looked for women, living a happy life again. 2 months ago he wandered into a newly opened brothel. Coincidentally, the courtesan of the brothel was looking for a benefactor. He took a fancy to the courtesan's wife and competed with others. In one breath, the price soared to 100,000 taels of silver. In the end, when it was time to take out money, he only had 1,000 taels of silver. Someone thought that he was a troublemaker and wanted to kidnap him to settle the score. Louis had no choice but to use his name, intending to keep the peace. Who would have thought that he was a swindler pretending to be a prince and wanted to send him to the Yamen? This was bad. If he wanted to see the Yamen, the matter would blow up. If an imperial censor went to report him to the emperor, he would be finished. Fortunately, the courtesan's wife put in a few good words for him and begged the brothel keeper to let him off. Louis was a man after all, so he couldn't avoid the common problem of men. He loved his face. Moreover, his life had been smooth sailing for more than 10 years. When had he ever been saved by a woman? He couldn't take this lying down. The next day he bought enough money and went to the brothel keeper's house, saying that he wanted to see the courtesan. However, the brothel keeper told him that a rich man had come this morning. When he heard that the courtesan didn't get chosen last night, he happily took out 10,000 taels of silver as a deposit and said that he would come back at night to pick her up. Louis was intercepted by someone, so how could he let the matter rest? When he saw the rich man that night, he waved his hand and gave him 10,000 taels of silver. He told him to take the deposit and scram. The other party refused and they quarreled again. This time, Louis didn't dare to reveal his identity as a prince. The other party wasn't afraid of him either. The stalemate couldn't be resolved and the brothel keeper came up with an idea. Both parties would compete and the highest bidder would win. Louis only had 100,000 taels of silver. How could it be that much? The rich man was generous and threw out 100,000 taels of silver. In addition to the 10,000 taels of silver that he had paid earlier, he easily won. Louis was flustered and exasperated. At this time the courtesan appeared. She said that compared to the fat rich man she would rather follow Louis. She took out 50,000 taels of silver and gave it to the brothel keeper. She wanted to leave with him. The rich man didn't have any more silver and left in disappointment. By right, Louis should be satisfied with the return of the courtesan, but he refused. How could he use a woman's money to show off? Furthermore, it was the private savings of a prostitute. Thus, he left the 100,000 taels of silver as a deposit and boasted that he would take her away the next day when he had enough money. This was the problem. Louis had been chased out of the capital and didn't have that much money on him. The 100,000 taels of silver he had was given to him by concubine Lu before the incident. Concubine Lu had told him to buy some belongings outside so that he could build his own residence when he left the palace. Thus he set his sights on his family. He went to the Lu family's great exchange hall and found his eldest maternal uncle. He found an excuse and deceived him into giving him 50,000 taels of silver. Then he returned to the brothel and used the money to redeem the courtesan. At this point Louis's voice was hoarse and out of tune. He pitifully asked for water. Yu Shu pointed at the table and asked him to pour himself some water. Taking this opportunity she commented, "So, you used 150,000 taels of silver to redeem the courtesan? Then when you ran out of money you came to our brothel to extort money?" If Shui Rui wasn't here she really wanted to poke Louis's head and scold him for being a wastrel. That was 150,000 taels of silver. If it was exchanged for real money, it would be enough to form a small mountain. Louis gulped down a mouthful of water and turned his head to reveal a pickled face. He miserably said, "What do you know? I was cheated by someone. I'm so miserable." It turned out that when he redeemed the courtesan's wife said that she wanted to stay for a day to tidy up her belongings. Louis agreed and did not take her away that day. Instead he returned to the Taoist temple. 2 days later he returned to the capital. When he arrived at the brothel it was empty. There was no sign of the courtesan. "Ha! You deserve it. You deserve it." Yu Shu roared bluntly with laughter, and she inadvertently turned around yet saw Shui Rui seeming to be lost in thought. "Who gave you the idea to extort money from Wang Jilu?" Shui Rui suddenly asked. Louis blankly repeated, "Who gave me the idea?" "I'm asking you. Who taught you to kill people in my territory?" Shui Rui asked. Louis was afraid of him. He thought for a moment and said, "It was the idea of my eunuch." "Did he go with you to Wang Jilu today?" "No." Louis remembered. "That kid had a stomachache before we left, so I didn't bring him along." Shui Rui frowned. He was sure that this eunuch that gave Louis trouble had already vanished without a trace at this moment. Yu Shu could tell that something was up. She did not expose him in front of Louis. She wanted to know what was going on. With a plan in mind she no longer had any misgivings. She kicked Louis and said, "It's fine if I don't kill you, but you have to give me a handle. That way we won't dare to find trouble with you in the future." Louis glanced at Shui Rui who was glaring at him like a tiger. He weakly said, "Speak. What do you want?" Chapter 727. "Here, I've already written it." Louis reluctantly handed over a statement to Yu Shu, who was supervising him from behind. The uncut piece of paper was densely filled with small words. He personally recounted how he was cheated of a large sum of money in a brothel, how he ran to the Wangji Tower for extortion when he was short of money, and how he poisoned a small hooligan to death in his wine. He recounted the whole process of how he was cheated of a large sum of money in a brothel, how he ran to the Wangji Tower to extort money, and how he poisoned a small hooligan to death. Finally, he attached a debt note, stating that he had borrowed 100,000 taels of silver from Yushu tonight, and that he would return it in the future. One was a confession and the other was a debt receipt, both of which had 7 or 8 bloody fingerprints on them. It could be considered as a signature and there was no way to deny it. After Yushu checked that there was nothing wrong with it, she passed the confession to Shui Rui and put away the receipt for the debt. Then she sneered and warned Lu Yi, "I'll take it that tonight's matter is over. If I hear even half a rumor outside that's detrimental to my big brother and me, then I'll blame it all on you. I'll first ask my big brother to report you to the imperial court, then I'll take the receipt to the emperor to collect the debt. Do you hear me?" "Yes, I hear you," Lu Yi said in a muffled voice. Since when had he been so cowardly? He knew that he would not be able to seek revenge on the two of them after he wrote such a thing today. His heart was filled with hatred, but he had no other choice. He could only hope to send these two devils away as soon as possible to preserve his life. Yushu and Shui Rui looked at each other. Both of them felt that it was about time, and only then did they let Lu Yi go. They stepped on the broken wood at the entrance and left this damned place. As for how to deal with the aftermath, Lu Yi would think of a way to cover it up. When Yushu saw Jin Ku, she finally understood why Shui Rui was able to enter Lu Yi's guest house so quietly. If she had not seen many guards lying on the ground on the way out, it would be really hard for her to imagine that this honest-looking man was actually a top-notch martial arts expert. The three of them met up in a corner of the garden. Jin Ku also took a few extra glances at Yushu, and he was also a little surprised. It turned out that Shui Rui had broken into the prince's mansion to rescue her in a fit of rage for the sake of a beauty. He had thought that he should meet a beautiful young lady, but it turned out that she was a tomboy. He couldn't be blamed for his poor eyesight. It was true that Yushu didn't like to wear dresses or hairpins. She wore her hair in a bun and only drew her eyebrows without drawing her eyes. At first glance, her tall and straight figure did indeed look like a fair and handsome young man. "This is Jin Ku, brother Jin." Shui Rui briefly introduced Yushu. He did not hide it from Jin Ku. He held one of Yushu's hands and took her out at night. When they arrived at the front yard, they saw Lu Hong and Su Qing standing guard at the door. Only then did he let go of her and change to a shoulder guard. When the two guards saw that Yushu was unscathed, they were relieved and apologized to her with a face full of shame. "It's our incompetence to protect Milord." Yushu waved her hand and said, "Let's go back first." Then she shared a horse with Shui Rui. The group left in a hurry and hurried back to Wangji Tower. On this side, the people of Wangji Tower were gloomy, but when they saw that Shui Rui had brought Yushu back, they rejoiced for the time being. Everyone had stayed up for half a night and their stomachs were empty. The cook, Xiao Qin, took care of cooking a large pot of chicken noodle soup and accompanied it with a few side dishes. She scooped a large bowl for Yushu first and carried it upstairs in the backyard. Shui Rui changed downstairs. Xan Lishan took advantage of the chaos to steal a jar of good wine from the kitchen and sneaked into Yushu's room. He saw that she was holding a big bowl of noodles. The fragrance assailed his nostrils. He was so greedy that his stomach was growling. He said sourly, "After a night of torment, there were dead people and kidnappings, but you still have an appetite. TSK, is it delicious?" When the incident happened in the evening, there was a lot of noise in the front. He was burning the elixir in the backyard and did not pay attention to what was happening outside. When he was hungry and came out to look for food, he found that the whole backyard was empty. When he went to the front, everyone was there. Some were crying, some were anxious. After asking, he learned about the cause and effect. "I know that you are brave and careful. Nothing will happen. Come, drink some wine to calm down." Xan Lishan poured a cup of wine for her. Then he took out a small bag from his arms. It was the size of a palm. He put it on the table and pushed it to Yushu. "Here, this is the Tihu incense that you wanted. There are 10 pills inside. You can go back and try it. See if it smells the same as what the Xian family gave you." Yushu said happily, "You really made it? Let me see." She put down the wine cup and opened the bag to take a look. The color and fragrance were the same as what Xan Yi gave her. Except for the shape and size, there was no problem. It seemed that Xan Lishan did not lie. The secret Tihu incense of the Xian family was first made by him. "Thank you, fifth uncle." She kept the bag like a treasure. She would try it tomorrow. If she could really make the imitation Tai Ching cauldron work and she could control the 6 lines mystical technique, then she would thank the heavens. Don't thank me. I have also benefited from you. I did not give it to you for free. Xan Lishan looked at Yu Shu. You borrowed the Zhuge Tong from me. It has been a few days. It is time to return it to me. Yu Shu laughed dryly. If he did not mention it, she would have forgotten about it. That day she asked Jing Chen to find out about the Tidian. She was afraid that he would expose himself, so she borrowed the Zhuge Tong from Xan Lishan. Jing Chen knew that it was Yun Hua's legacy and asked for it. She could not bear to reject him, so she gave it to him. That, fifth uncle, I want to discuss something with you. Xan Lishan said warily. Discuss what? Don't tell me you want to keep my treasure. No, listen to my explanation, Yu Shu said with a bitter face. I borrowed the Zhuge Tong for Jing Chen's emergency. Blame me for speaking too fast. I told him that it was a legacy of Yun Hua's son. You also know that the relationship between father and son is not good. This thing is just a memory. When he asked for it, I told him no. This is a gift from your father to fifth uncle Xian. I can't make the decision. He begged me to ask you on his behalf. No matter what your request is, as long as you can give him the Zhuge Tong, he will do anything. Of course, what she said was nonsense. She was already prepared to bleed for Jing Chen. She did not expect that after listening to her words, Xan Lishan became silent. He hugged the wine jar and stared blankly for a while. Sigh. He suddenly sighed. I am sorry to Big Brother Yun. This treasure does not belong to me in the first place. Should be. Forget it, just give it to him. He held the jar and drank a few mouthfuls of wine. He shook his head and walked away. He did not take the opportunity to ask for an exorbitant price from Yu Shu. Yu Shu was secretly glad, but at the same time she felt a little depressed. She knew very well what Xan Lishan did not say. Zhuge Tong should have been a life-saving item left for his first wife's eldest son. But Xan secretly took it for herself. That day when Jing Chen asked her for it, she did not notice that Shui Rui's identity was suspicious. Now that she knew, it was a pity. Why are you frowning? Shui Rui washed up and came to talk to Yu Shu. When he entered the door, he saw that she was troubled. Yu Shu looked at him deeply. She saw that his hair was wet and draped over his shoulders. Without saying a word, she went into the house and took a cotton cloth. She stood behind him, wrapped his hair, and wrung it out one strand at a time. When she did not see him, she missed him very much. But when she saw him, she did not know where to start. She had a lot of things on her mind. She wanted to ask him if he was Yun Hua's long-lost son, but she was afraid that he would suffer in silence. Where have you been all these days? I'm so worried. Shui Rui could not see her conflicted expression. He hesitated for a moment and told her, someone tricked me into leaving. They took me to a remote place and locked me up. They did not allow me to return to the capital. It was not far from what Yu Shu had guessed. She asked curiously, who was it? It was Yun Hua. Yu Shu was stunned. Before she could think further, Shui Rui pressed her hand, took out the cotton cloth and put it aside. He pulled her to sit beside him. Their eyes met. As they stared at each other, he gradually became calm. Shu, I should not have hidden it from you. The eldest son of Yun Hua that you are looking for is me. He hid it from her at first because he was afraid to face it. He hoped that in her heart, he would always be the glorious young Master Shui, and not a pitiful person who hid his identity. However, after he confessed to her, he felt indescribably relaxed. When Yu Shu heard the sudden truth, she was a little dumbfounded. She thought that he would not say it, but he said it so bluntly. Actually, I have guessed it. This time, it was Shui Rui's turn to be nervous. You guessed it? When? Yu Shu felt his palm was cold. She looked at his face, which had become much thinner these days. Even if she had some complaints, they disappeared. She pursed her lips and said that after he disappeared, she asked Feng Xiaomiao to help her find out who the Suzhou magistrate was in order to ask Yun Hua for help. She accidentally learned that the person was Shui Rui's father, which made her guess. Shui Rui could not help but laugh. What a lucky shot. Yu Shu said unhappily, you're still talking about it? I asked you to help me find someone and you agreed. You lied to me and said that you sent people to Yang City to find out information, and I foolishly believed you. She was angry when she mentioned it. She loved to lie, but she hated it when people lied to her. She immediately reached out to pinch his waist. Shui Rui had just come out of the shower and was wearing thin clothes. She pinched a piece of his flesh and he gasped in pain. I didn't mean to hide it from you. I also heard from you that Yunhua wanted to find his eldest son and asked you to find the Suzhou magistrate from more than 20 years ago. That's how I found out. I really sent people to Yang City to find out the traces left by my biological parents. Did you find anything? Yushu was distracted by him, so she put down her hand and asked him. Shui Rui's eyes were gloomy. Yunhua's original name is Lu Yen, and my biological mother's surname is Han. Yushu understood the look in his eyes and comforted him. I believe that her spirit in heaven will see you grow up safely. She will be able to smile in the underworld when she sees you growing up safely. When Shui Rui heard this, he opened his arms and held her in his arms. There was warmth in his heart, and he had the courage to confide in a low voice. 3 years ago, because of the death of the 10th princess, the Shui family was in chaos. My grandfather made a slip of the tongue and let me know that I was not the flesh and blood of the Shui family. I was adopted by my father when he was away from home, and he raised me as his biological son under my mother's name. I didn't want to believe it, so I went to ask my mother, which made her ill. She scolded me for killing my father and killing my whole family. I was devastated. My grandfather refused to tell me the whereabouts of my biological parents, so I ran away from home. After a few twists and turns, I went to Yang City and I met you there. He tried to talk about the past as calmly as possible, but Yushu felt sad when she heard it. She reached out and hugged his waist, silently comforting him. She did not expect that he would reveal another unimaginable past. Speaking of this, I still have something to confess to you. Do you remember when you were living in the Ji family's ancestral house as a prostitute? One night, there was a thief in the house, and you rescued a masked man who was injured by a hidden weapon in the garden? That person was me. Chapter 728. It rained yesterday, so it was especially cold this morning. Shui Rui woke up after sleeping for less than 2 hours. Last night, he and Yushu talked all night and didn't go to sleep until the sun rose in the east. From Yushu, he learned that the Shui family's current predicament started from the Imperial Wanted Order. Tracing back to the source, it turned out that Jing Qin remembered the whole story of his assassination and drew the portrait of Su Li, the second chief steward of the Shui family, which made the Shui family be suspected by the emperor. Not to mention that the emperor became suspicious and wanted to investigate the Shui family to the end. Even Shui Rui thought it was too coincidental. When Jing Qin was in danger, it happened that Su Li was ordered to go to Yang to discuss the marriage with the Ji family, and they were on their way back to the capital. Su Li was arrested and imprisoned, and then the suspect from Taisha Shuyuan disappeared without a trace. In addition, he was surprised that his grandfather liked a young lady from the right magistrate's mansion. Even if he had an engagement with the 10th princess and couldn't get a good match, he was the eldest son of the Shui family, so he could be a good match. In the end, the marriage was ruined as soon as it was started. Instead, he followed Su Li Bai to the south and stayed for a few days before leaving for home. Now that he thought about it, it might be a cover. His grandfather asked Su Li to go to Yang to discuss the marriage, but it was unknown if he had another mission. If it was really his grandfather who sent Su Li to stop Jing Chen from going to the capital, then what he wanted was thought-provoking. Younger brother, are you awake? Jin Ke knocked on the door and woke up Shui Rui, who was in deep thought. He pressed his forehead and went outside to open the door for him. You were busy yesterday. Why didn't you sleep more and get up so early? Jin Ke looked at Shui Rui, who was neatly dressed, paused and then asked, Little brother, are you going out? Ever since Shui Rui guessed Jin Ke's background and Yunhua allowed him to accompany Shui Rui to the capital, he changed the way he addressed Jin Ke. For the past half a month, he had been addressing Jin Ke as Lord Shui. Now he addressed him as younger brother. Shui Rui didn't care how he tried to get close to him. Shui Rui's attitude towards him was the same as before. Let him follow if he wants to. But he did not ask him about Yunhua. I want to return to the Prime Minister's residence to report that I am safe. Do you want to follow me? Shui Rui said. Even if he wasn't allowed to go with him, he would still secretly follow behind him. Of course. Godfather asked me to stay close to you and protect you. Little brother. Why don't we have breakfast first? Shui Rui nodded. He asked someone to come in and set the table for breakfast. While eating, he asked Jin Ke, does anyone in the capital know you? When he returned to the capital this time, there was suddenly one more person by his side. Someone with ulterior motives would definitely ask around. If they found out about Jin Ke's background, they were afraid that there would be more complications. Jin Ke saw that he had finished his bowl of soup and hurriedly took a big spoon to refill his bowl. He said, Don't be afraid. Every time I go to the capital to work, I always disguise myself. No one will recognize my face. If someone asks, just say that I am a wanderer. You were kidnapped in Fenghua Manor and I saved you. Shui Rui disappeared for no reason, so there must be an explanation. This explanation was barely believable. After they had breakfast, Yushu was still sleeping upstairs. Shui Rui didn't allow anyone to wake her up. He called Lin Fu over and gave him some instructions. Someone died last night. Although it wasn't reported to the authorities, the truth couldn't be hidden forever. It was best for the restaurant to temporarily close its doors to avoid trouble. They didn't know how long they would be closed. As soon as Shui Rui left, Lin Fu gathered everyone in Wangji Tower and passed on Shui Rui's instructions. Everyone split up to clean up. Gui Lu brought a few waiters to clean up the upper and lower floors. Lin Fu brought Xiaoqing and Xiaodai to gather all the valuable decorations together and locked them in the storeroom. Xiaoqing ordered the workers to sort out the delicacies in the kitchen. They stored the ones that could be stored and checked out the ones that couldn't be stored for a long time. With this calculation, they had lost at least a few hundred taels of silver. Fortunately, there were still a few days before the next purchase. Otherwise, they would have wasted even more. The busy outside was in full swing. They moved quietly and didn't make much noise. Yu Shu slept in her room under the blanket and didn't show any signs of waking up. 3 days ago, Shui Lingnan entered the palace to persuade Emperor Zhao Qing to faint from anger. He was quietly sent out of the palace and didn't step out of the door. No matter who came to ask, he ignored them all. On this day, he heard a servant hurriedly report that eldest young master had returned home. He wasn't surprised and only calmly ordered the steward beside him to bring him to his study. After the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the grandfather and grandson met again. After more than 10 days and experiencing many twists and turns, they didn't show the slightest bit of excitement. Shui Lingnan listened to Shui Rui's story of being kidnapped in Fenghua Mansion and being trapped for many days before escaping. He was quite indifferent. Since you're back, go to the Supreme Court as soon as possible and report to them. It doesn't matter if you don't escape from punishment. It doesn't matter if you lose your position, but don't ruin the reputation of the Shui family because of you. Shui Rui had already learned from Yu Shu that he was suspended from his post. Even if he didn't care about fame and fortune, he still felt a little upset. He was a 2-rank Jinshi and had a clear conscience as the Xiaoqing of the Supreme Court. Although investigating and handling cases was tiring, he never slacked off. He didn't want others to say that he relied on his family background and that he did his best in everything that was within his duty. I'll go find Lord Gua and explain this matter. Shui Rui couldn't tell if Shui Lingnan didn't care about his kidnapping, or if he didn't believe his lies. So he took the initiative to bring it up. As soon as I returned to the capital, I heard that Governor Su was mistaken as a wanted criminal and was arrested by the Supreme Court. My disappearance was also publicized as an escape. Who has ulterior motives and used my disappearance to frame the Shui family? Shui Lingnan sized him up and said, "Who do you think it could be?" Shui Rui met his gaze and said, "That depends on what crime Governor Su committed." No one knew better than Shui Lingnan whether Su Li was innocent or not. Was it Jing Qin who misunderstood, or was Shui Lingnan really plotting something in the dark? Hearing the doubt in his words, Shui Lingnan put on a straight face and said sternly, "We, the Shui family, have been loyal and upright for generations. We wholeheartedly protect the nation. How can we have the intention to rebel against our superiors? There's something fishy about Su Li's arrest and there's still no conclusion. But this old man thinks that the innocent will be innocent. Even if the emperor is temporarily deceived, the truth will be revealed sooner or later. There's no need to worry." Just from his expression and reaction, there was nothing wrong with the old man. It was as if he'd been wronged. Shui Rui lowered his head and said, "Even though that's the case, there are plenty of opportunists in the capital who see where the wind blows. When they see that my family is being suspected, there are those who would seize the opportunity to add insult to injury and create something out of nothing. We have to guard against them. Since I've returned to the capital, I asked grandfather to bring me to the palace to see the emperor. I'll report the truth and the rumors outside will be dispelled." Shui Lingnan frowned and looked troubled. That's how it should be. But the day before yesterday, this old man went to the palace to admonish the emperor. My words offended the emperor. I don't expect to go to the palace to see the emperor in the near future. What's the reason for this? Shui Rui pretended to be surprised. In fact, he'd heard Yu Shu's report last night. The truth was much more serious than what Shui Lingnan had said. Emperor Zhao Qing fainted from anger. The empress was furious and flared up with Shui Lingnan as the leader of the old officials. Once the emperor woke up, he chased them out of the palace. You haven't been in the capital these days and don't know. The emperor has ordered Prince of Dongjing Jiang Huaying to send troops to Dongying. This is not appropriate. In recent years, the Mongols have repeatedly harassed the border cities. It's precisely because of Prince of Dongjing that they don't dare to invade. If Jiang Huaying leads troops and the Mongols invade the pass, once Ningdong city falls, the consequences will be unthinkable. This is the first. The second is that the Jiang family has been guarding the northeast for many years. His Majesty has heard slanderous rumors and misunderstood the Jiang family to be disloyal. Thus, he brought their mother and sister to Anling to impede them. Now he has ordered Jiang Huaying and Dongyue to send troops across the sea. Although the reason is not known to outsiders, Jiang Huaying will not be willing. You were once sworn brothers with him and should know his character. Let me ask you, will he obey or not? Xue Lingnan was agitated and his attitude was overbearing. In the end he actually asked Xue Rui. He didn't know whether to answer or not. Grandson doesn't know. Humph, Xue Lingnan coldly snorted and said, you know what you're doing. It's fine if you don't say it. In short, appointing Prince of Dongjing as the Grand Marshal of the Eastern Punitive Expedition will cause endless trouble. In order to change His Majesty's mind, I entered the palace with Grand Elder Zheng and Grand Elder Chu to explain the situation. Alas, His Majesty insisted and listened to the sycophants and refused to retract the order. Yeah. Xue Rui noticed the lingering sound at the end of his words. He raised his eyes and asked, who is the sycophant you are talking about? Although Xue Lingnan was a meticulous official in the court, unlike Prime Minister Yin, he didn't easily make enemies. It was rare for him to use the term sycophant to describe others. Who else could it be? Previously, when we were discussing who to send to attack Wei country, there were many different opinions in the court. Unexpectedly, during the few days when I was ordered to return home and not attend morning court, the Celestial Commissioner Ren Qiming submitted a memorial and laid out a bunch of metaphysical theories. He said that they were observing the heavens at night and divining good and bad fortune. He named Prince of Dongjing to lead the army on the Eastern Punitive Expedition. Ren Qiming is only an adjutant, how could he have come up with such a big idea? It must be Zhu Muzhao who added fuel to the fire behind the scenes. How could Xue Lingnan not know? Seeing that Xue Lingnan was furious, Xue Rui thought for a moment and understood. Just now the old man said that the innocent would be innocent. Perhaps in his heart he blamed the arrest of Su Li and the suspicion of the Xue family on the Celestial Commissioner. On the surface, Su Li was imprisoned in the Supreme Court. In reality, the Emperor handed him over to the Celestial Commissioner for private interrogation. Now he was locked up in the secret room of the Celestial Commissioner. Even an outsider like Yushu could find out about this. How could Xue Lingnan not know about it? The reason why Xue Lingnan sighed was because the Celestial Commissioner was worthy of his reputation as the #1 person in front of the Emperor. His Majesty indeed relied on the Celestial Commissioner. Grandfather, on the other hand, your advice is unpleasant to the ear. Xue Rui explained the current situation in one sentence. Advice was unpleasant to the ear. The Emperor would not listen. With the Celestial Commissioner on the side, Xue Lingnan could forget about stopping the Emperor from dispatching the Prince of Dongjing. Go to the Supreme Court first, Xue Lingnan said. As for the matter of entering the palace, forget it. I will arrange for your second aunt to enter the palace to visit your aunt as soon as possible. She will explain the matter of you being kidnapped. When she sees the Emperor, she will explain. The grandfather and grandson didn't have anything else to say, so Xue Rui sensibly left. In the days that he had been away from home, the people in the Fu were most worried about were Madame Xue and Xue Jinshuan. As soon as he left the main room, he first went to see Xue Jinshuan. After confirming that she had not been neglected while he was away, he returned to his courtyard. He called over the manservant Hataku and carefully inquired about Madame Xue's current situation. Madame Xue's body was still the same, sometimes good and sometimes bad. The medicine could not be stopped and the medical treatment could not be stopped. Fortunately, the Xue family had a large business and could afford to support her. Jin Ku followed at his side. When Hataku left, he asked Xue Rui with a look of surprise, if you're worried about Madame Xue, why don't you go see her? Would you feel relieved if you sent someone to ask? Xue Rui replied, Grandfather doesn't like me to get close to Mother. Without his permission, I cannot go to the rear courtyard to see her. Without Xue Lingnan's permission, he could not go to the rear courtyard to visit his mother. He could only send someone to ask about her. Hearing this, Jin Ku's brows knit together. It seems that the Xue family does not treat my little brother as kindly as I thought. Don't be afraid. If you want to see her, I have a way to help you cross the sea without anyone knowing. Jin Ku patted his chest in assurance. However, Shui Rui shook his head and refused. He did not want to see Madame Shui, not only because Shui Lingnan did not allow it, but also because he was afraid to face her. There were some things that could not be explained in a few words. Saying it was useless, so it was better not to say it. After returning to the residence, Shui Rui changed into a set of regular clothes and went to the Supreme Court to ask for forgiveness. When Shui Rui arrived at the Supreme Court, he saw Guo Huaiyan and explained to him how he had been kidnapped in Fenghua Manor. With Jin Ku as a witness, Guo Huaiyan did not criticize him. Instead, he tactfully told him that the emperor was in a fit of anger and that it was not convenient for him to plead for leniency. He told him to go back and wait for news. Seeing that there was no hope of reinstatement, Shui Rui did not reveal any sadness. He respectfully thanked his superior and went to the rear courtyard to pack up some of his personal belongings. After bidding farewell to a few of his colleagues, he pretended to ignore those spying and sympathetic gazes and directly returned to Wangji Tower. After the beginning of winter, it was rare to see a clear day. Today there was a rare sunny day overhead. Shui Rui entered through the back door and immediately saw Yushu lying on a rocking chair in the middle of the courtyard, basking in the sun. She wore a loose blue skirt with a blanket around her waist. She took off her shoes and put on a pair of snow-white socks. She stood on the edge of the chair with her knees bent and her hands behind her head. Her eyelids were closed, and as she rocked back and forth, the light shone on her rosy cheeks, illuminating the haze in his heart. When Yushu heard movement, she yawned and opened her eyelids. Turning her head, she saw Shui Rui and grinned. "You're back so early. I thought you would be back at night. How was it? Did you go to the Supreme Court? You didn't lose your position, did you?" Shui Rui shook his head and sighed. "Guodaran can't make the decision. He will still be suspended and investigated. In my opinion, he is not far from being dismissed." Yushu jokingly said, "It's good that you are dismissed. It's too tiring for you to be the Shaoqing of the Supreme Court. You have to investigate murder cases every 2 or 3 days. After a long time, your luck will be bad." She bent down to put on her shoes, hugged the blanket and moved out of the rocking chair. She stretched out her hand and said, "Lie here and rest for a while. Bask in the sun and get rid of the mold." Looking at the faint bruises under his eyes, she was too embarrassed to say that her heart ached for him. Shui Rui obediently lay down. The soft cushion on his back made him feel warm. Unconsciously, he closed his eyes and relaxed. Yushu stood by his side and watched over him for a while. Seeing that he was about to fall asleep, she shook off the blanket in her hand and gently covered him. Just when she was about to leave, she heard him say, "Ah Shu, do you want to open a Dei hall?" "Ha!" She turned her head and saw his burning eyes looking at her. "I will give you the Wangji Lu and open a Dei hall. How about it?" Chapter 729. People live for either fame or fortune. Who wouldn't be tempted by something as good as fame and fortune? Opening a great exchange hall was indeed a proposal that tempted Yushu. Let's put it this way, for a master of changes, becoming a celestial commissioner was a lifelong pursuit, but not every celestial commissioner official had the opportunity to open a great exchange hall. Although there was only a difference of one word between a great exchange hall and a great exchange hall, the difference was 1,000 miles. It wasn't difficult for a master of changes to become a master of changes in the Dian examination to open a small great exchange hall. All they had to do was to report to the local authorities. However, to be crowned with the word great, there had to be 2 hard conditions. First, the person who opened the great exchange hall had to be the head of an aristocratic family. To be called an aristocratic family, there had to be at least 6 generations of masters of changes, and they had to be a high-ranking official in the Celestial Commissioner. Second, there had to be 2 great masters of changes in the great exchange hall, and at least 6 masters of changes. Ordinary aristocratic families couldn't afford such a lineup. Only when these 2 hard conditions were met could they apply to the Celestial Commissioner. After a strict examination and official documents were issued, they could then open the doors. If Yushu wanted to open a great exchange hall, she couldn't fulfill the first condition. She was the imperial concubine of the Kunling Bureau and could barely be considered a high-ranking official in the Celestial Commissioner, but her father was a short-lived scholar. How could the Yu family gather 6 generations to become an aristocratic family of masters of changes? So when Shui Rui mentioned it like this, Yushu examined herself and immediately felt that he was seized by a sudden impulse. Coupled with the fact that the Shui clan was in trouble and the Forgotten Opportunity Pavilion was forced to close its doors to avoid disaster, He suddenly had the urge to use the forgotten opportunity pavilion for her to set up a barter shop. So she just smiled and didn't take it to heart. Shui Rui saw that she didn't take it seriously, so he didn't rush to discuss it with her. Instead, he sunbathed and thought about the feasibility of this matter as he gradually fell asleep. In the afternoon, people came one after another after hearing the news. First, they heard that the 11th prince had caused a ruckus at the Wangji Tower last night, followed by Lu Jiong, Ruilin, and the others who heard that Shui Rui had returned to the capital. He didn't see Feng Zhaomiao, so he probably went back to the barracks. As soon as Lu Tan saw Shui Rui, he sighed. "This morning, grandfather sent someone to my residence to report that you're safe and sound. He told me that you've been robbed. It's really fortunate that you're able to escape safely. I don't know which group of thieves had the audacity to do this." Shui Rui said. "They covered their faces, I couldn't tell who they were." Unable to get an answer, Lu Tan turned to Yu Shu and said, "Yesterday, 11th younger brother came here to cause trouble. I only heard the news this morning. You're really too strong. Cousin is not here, so you should look for me to make the decision. I heard that you left with 11th younger brother. Did he make things difficult for you?" Yu Shu already had an evaluation of Lu Tan as a fickle and heartless person. At this time, when she heard his belated statement, she just played it down. "Many thanks for your concern, but it was just a false alarm. 11th master was just joking with me. She was lying through her teeth and caused a death, so how could it be a joke?" Lu Tan didn't know how she escaped from Lu Yi's hands, but seeing that she didn't want to explain, it wasn't good to continue asking. After Lu Tan left, not long after, Lu Jiong and the others came, sighing and showing concern. Whether it was fake or not, Yu Shu couldn't tell, but little Ju Yi Ruilin said something that made her feel uncomfortable. He said, "When you disappeared, we looked for Miss Lianfang to inquire about your whereabouts, but she didn't know. Rumors were everywhere outside and we wanted to defend you, but we couldn't do anything." These words, it was not that he didn't trust Shui Rui, but because Yu Shu couldn't say anything, so he just looked on coldly. Yu Shu bluntly said, "This matter is my fault. After you disappeared, they came to find me. Little Ju Yi thought that I knew where you were hiding, but I couldn't answer." Ruilin suddenly felt embarrassed, looked at Shui Rui and quickly said, "Don't wrongly accuse me. When did I say that Brother Rui was hiding? At that time, everyone was present. I clearly asked you where Brother Rui went." Yu Shu put on a fake smile. "Maybe I remembered it wrong." Ruilin felt that she was deliberately trying to sow discord, and he was annoyed. When he was about to argue, he heard Prince Xiang's heir Lu Jiong cough and interrupt. "Anyway, it's good that you are fine. In my opinion, we haven't got together for a long time. Why don't we take advantage of today to set up a table and get drunk together? Put aside all the troubles and worries first. Brother Rui, what do you think?" With a faint smile on his face, Shui Rui reached out and patted Lu Jiong on the shoulder, nodded and said yes, as if he didn't care about the quarrel between Yu Shu and Ruilin just now. They were a group of men drinking, and Yu Shu didn't like to get involved, so she went upstairs to pack up and left with an excuse. After she left, Lu Jiong joked at the table, "Don't look at the Lotus House as a woman, but she has more business than us men." Ruilin had just been tricked by Yu Shu, and now that he had drunk 2 cups of wine, he couldn't help but mock. "Not only business, she has more troubles, haven't you heard? The second branch of the Yin family complained everywhere. It is said that Miss Lianfang's biological mother was originally a servant of their family. In the past, she had an affair with an examinee who was a guest in the outer courtyard. In the end, she stole the master's property and eloped." Other than Shui Rui, who had just come back last night and didn't know about it, the rest of the people present had heard about this farce. They didn't expect Ruilin to talk so bluntly in front of Shui Rui, so someone immediately winked at him, hoping that he would shut up. Didn't he see that Shui Rui didn't even drink wine? Ruilin acted as if he didn't notice at all and continued, "Several Yamans have received the complaint and sent people to the Yu residence to arrest Madame Yu. Miss Lianfang didn't buy it and beat the officials away. She refused to go to court no matter what and claimed that it was Second Master Yin who slandered her. This is puzzling. If she didn't have a guilty conscience, why didn't she dare to go to court to confront him? In the end, he even asked Shui Rui, 'You're sworn siblings with her, so you ought to know more than outsiders like us. I'm curious, could it be that there's really something that can't be brought to light?' Lu Jiong truly couldn't bear listening to this any longer. If it was in the past, Ruilin would never have dared to speak to Shui Rui in such a manner. Wasn't it because he saw that the Shui clan had lost power that he became frivolous? Alright, you talk too much. As a man, you really don't feel ashamed to talk about a girl's family behind her back." Lu Jiong had long disliked Ruilin's virtue of changing the direction of the wind. When Ruilin was in glory he followed him around and called him brother. When Ruilin was in trouble he showed a different attitude. Ruilin was rebuked by Lu Jiong and was unhappy. He pulled a long face and said, "I'm asking Brother Rue, is it any of your business?" Lu Jiong fiercely drank a mouthful of wine and sneered, "I don't like you. I don't care what you do. If you don't want to drink then go away. Don't gossip here." "What do you mean?" Ruilin became angry out of humiliation. He slammed the table and stood up. How could he bear it when others pointed at his nose and scolded him? "Don't you understand what I said?" Seeing that the two young and vigorous young people were about to roll up their sleeves and fight, Lu Tan, who pretended to be deaf and mute for a long time, had to open his mouth to persuade them. All right. Don't talk too much. How much hatred can there be between brothers? Why are you so calculative? Sit down, all sit down. Fill up the wine and calm down." Lu Jiong could not give Ruilin face, but he could not give Lu Tan face. Ruilin was the same. The two sat down angrily, but they turned their faces and ignored each other. Lu Tan was helpless. The atmosphere was so tense, how could he still be in the mood to drink? So he said to Shui Rue, "Cousin, you see, let's go." Shui Rue gently shook the wine glass and looked at them. He was still clear and bright and he did not show his emotions. "I just returned to the capital and haven't recovered yet. I feel sleepy as soon as I sit down. I'm going to catch up on my sleep. I won't send you off." After that, he left them and left. Lu Jiong felt very aggrieved. Shui Rue was 3 years older than him. Because they were cousins, they were closer to each other. Moreover, he had been following Shui Rue around since he was a child. Every time he did something bad, it was Shui Rue who helped him take the blame. Even when he ate meat for the first time, when he saw blood and fainted for the first time at the age of 13, it was Shui Rue who secretly took him to the south of the city to find a doctor. In his heart, Shui Rue was on par with his own older brother. However, he was unable to help Shui Rue in the slightest when Shui Rue was in a predicament, so how could he not feel depressed in his heart? The few of them left the Wangji Tower one after another. Lin Fu closed the back door and went into the kitchen to bring out a bowl of hangover soup for Shui Rue. Shui Rue was lying on his side on the Luohan couch. He was very sleepy, but he could not sleep. Seeing Lin Fu come in with a bowl and plate, he lazily said, "I didn't drink much. There's no need to sober up. Take it away." Lin Fu retreated to the door and was stopped by him. "How much money is there in the accounts?" Lin Fu quietly reported a number. After a pause, he heard Shui Rue say, "Have Xiao Lu go to Nanlin Wood Shop and invite Gue Shu over." Those who started with the word Gue were all loyal servants under Shui Rue. For example, Gue Lu and Gue Qi. The only one he would call Gue Shu was Gue Da, the confidant Shui Fu had left for him. After Lin Fu left, Shui Rue got up from the bed. He washed his face with cold water and went to the study next door to plan. After seeing Shui Lingnan, he felt that the future of the Shui family was bleak. Officials that were suspected by the emperor never had a good ending. Furthermore, the Shui family had been prosperous for a long time. They were past their prime and would not be far from their decline. Shui Guifei was favored, but she could not interfere with the court. Lu Tan was ambitious, but he did not have the power and influence that Ning Wang had accumulated for many years. If something happened in the future, he could only protect himself. Xiang Wang was idle. He might speak up for the Shui family, but he would not be able to turn the tide. If he could not retreat in one piece, Shuilingnan's position as premier would be difficult to maintain. Once he was demoted, the Shui family would not be the same as before. His adoptive father, Shui Zhao, had treated him with great kindness. After all, he grew up under the protection of the Shui family. With such great kindness, he would not stand by and do nothing. Even if he could not turn the tide, he would share weal and woe with them. Only then would he be worthy of being a human. Before the Shui family lost power, he needed to do something for Yushu. Even if he could not protect her in the future, she would not be bullied or tortured by others. Chapter 730. The news of Shui Rue's return to the capital spread in less than 3 days. Someone saw him entering and leaving the Supreme Court in broad daylight. Although he did not wear official robes or ride in a sedan chair, at least he showed his face. It was difficult to confirm the rumors of his escape. In the following half a month, Shui Rue had people spread the news that he had been kidnapped in Fenghua Manor to tea houses, restaurants, and other crowded places. He himself often went in and out of Hengwu Building and other places where high officials and nobles gathered. He was always surrounded by people, and his appearance was full of confidence. He did not look the slightest bit guilty or timid, and he did not look down on himself. On the contrary, it made people remember that 3 years ago, Master Bai of the city of Cheng was once a distinguished scholar in Anling. Shui Rui's high-profile actions naturally entered into Yu Shu's ears. Fortunately, she knew Shui Rui's character and didn't arouse suspicion, and she only knew that he surely had his reasons for doing this. As expected, after half a month, the direction of the wind in the capital changed. Previously, it was said that the Shui family had disloyal intentions. Now, it was said that someone saw that noble consort Shui was pregnant and hated the Shui family's prosperity, so they set up a trap to frame her. The most obvious result was that there were people in court who dared to speak up for Shui Lingnan. Perhaps Shui Rui's actions sent a signal and gave the right minister's people confidence. One day, 13 officials with important positions wrote a joint petition, begging the emperor to show mercy and allow Shui Lingnan to return to court. Between the lines, they all said that Prime Minister Shui was the pillar of the country and the backbone of the emperor. They also hinted at a muddle-headed emperor of the previous dynasty who mistakenly killed a loyal official on a non-existent charge. There was a great suspicion that the emperor was not willing to pardon Shui Lingnan because he trusted his trusted subordinates far away from the virtuous officials. Emperor Zhao Qing had been on the throne for 14 years and did not have any great achievements that could compare to the brilliance of his ancestors. To be honest, he had been a rather mediocre emperor. At best, he had done nothing. But Emperor Zhao Qing did not want to be like this. He wanted to be like the other wise emperors in the history of the Yin dynasty. He wanted to expand the territory or reform the law to benefit the people and become an emperor whose name would go down in history. Unfortunately, he had the will but not the strength, so he was especially concerned about what the officials thought of him. He read the document asking for Shui Lingnan's pardon over and over again, and threw it into the corner several times, only to have someone pick it up again. He did not want these officials who were trying to coerce him with soft words to get what they wanted, but he also did not want to prove that he was the incapable ruler that they had written about. Because of this, he agonized over it for half a day, and then he quietly sent someone to announce the great commandment to the palace. No one knew what the two of them talked about, but the next day at court, Emperor Zhao Qing mentioned Shui Lingnan in a seemingly unintentional manner. He said that it had been a while since he had seen Shui Lingnan and that he missed him. He did not mention that there had been people who had written a joint petition on Shui Lingnan's behalf the day before. With one sentence, he summoned Shui Lingnan to the palace for a chat. On the third day, people once again saw the figure of the right minister in the court. After court, Shui Lingnan and a few of his old friends agreed to play chess at the lookout pavilion the next day. When he returned to the manor, he had someone bring Shui Rui in front of him. "You did well this time, but in the end you acted on your own and did not discuss it with me. Remember, this is the only time. There will not be a next time." It was rare that Shui Lingnan was not so serious today. In reality, he was in a good mood, otherwise he would not have chosen to meet him at the Sunset Plum Pavilion. After Shui Rui returned to the capital, every single move Shui Rui made was carried out under his watch, and he didn't interfere, yet never had he imagined that Shui Rui would be able to influence public opinion in such a short period of time. Moreover, Shui Rui had incited all the ministers to jointly submit a petition on his behalf, forcing the emperor to have no choice but to make a stand and allow him to return to the imperial court. Grandfather's teachings are correct, grandson will remember. Shui Rui did not claim credit or become arrogant. Everything he did was to repay the debt he owed, and also to repay the Shui family for their protection over the years. "In 2 days I will go ask for a grace for you and let you resume your position." Shui Lingnan looked at him meaningfully. "Don't be idle for a few days and then revert to your old ways. Don't be like those hedonistic sons, loitering around flowers and not doing proper work." The position of Vice Minister of the Supreme Court was, after all, very useful. It would be a pity to give it up. Grandson understands. 3 years ago, after tearing away the shameful cloth of his identity, when facing the old man, Shui Rui always listened respectfully, not like a grandfather and grandson, but like a superior and subordinate. After about the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Shui Rui walked out of the Sunset Plum Pavilion, slowly releasing a breath. When Shui Lingnan returned to court, he could meet the emperor. It would not be difficult to help him restore his position. It was not that he did not want to give up his position, but there was a matter on his mind. He must return to the Supreme Court to solve it. When he walked down the winding corridor, Shui Rui saw his attendant, Bao Da, standing under the nearby doorway and sticking his head out to look around. With a single glance, it was obvious that Bao Da was waiting for him, so Shui Rui gestured for Bao Da to come over. "What is it?" Hadaku reported in a low voice. Old Lin sent someone to deliver a message saying that there is a girl with the surname Jiang waiting for you at Wangji Lu. Shui Rui frowned, thought for a moment and then ordered, have old Chue prepare a carriage. Jiang Mia must have a request for him at this time to find him. An hour later Shui Rui saw Jiang Mia at Wangji Lu. She had obviously disguised herself. She wore a gray coarse robe, her hair was tied up in a high bun, and her face was smeared with a layer of pot ash. She held a bamboo hat in her hand, and there was a bamboo basket on a shoulder pole at her feet. Anyone who saw her appearance would not be able to recognize that this was the young princess of Dongjing Wangfu. I heard that you were kidnapped before? Jiang Mia saw Shui Rui coming in from outside and quickly got up. She subconsciously rubbed her cheeks with the back of her hand, wiping off a lump of black dirt. Her eyebrows were tied in a dead knot and she said gloomily, after your accident, I looked for you everywhere but I couldn't find your whereabouts. Later, when I learned that you were back, I wanted to see you, but the prince's mansion was full of spies. I was afraid that I would cause you more trouble, so I only found an opportunity to come out today. After hesitating for a moment, she said hesitantly, you should know that the emperor wants to force my brother to go overseas, so he has kept my mother and me under strict surveillance. Shui Rui sighed inwardly. Emperor Zhao Qing's intention was very obvious. He chose this time to let Lord Dongjing go to Japan, so he planned to make a move against the Jiang family. Lord Dongjing's family had been guarding the border for generations, and they had been trembling with fear until today. Finally, they had reached the limit of the emperor's tolerance. If they looked into it, it was not surprising. In history, there had not been an emperor who could tolerate a vassal king who had a higher prestige among the people than he did, and whose military power threatened the court. I know everything. Sit down first before we speak. Shui Rui sat down opposite her and lifted up a cup of tea to moisten his throat. Recently, he'd been drinking too much every day, causing the heat in his liver to be exuberant, and he had a lot of phlegm that was difficult to swallow. If he didn't drink a few more mouthfuls of tea, his throat would be sore when he spoke. It was rare for Jiang Qia to be obedient, so she sat back down and did not argue with Shui Rui. Before she came, she was still worried that Shui Rui would blame her for the matter of Yu Shu and her imperial brother being a good match. When she saw his good expression, she finally felt relieved and dared to continue speaking. I know very well what the emperor is thinking. He is angry because of my brother's recent accumulation of troops. He thinks that my Jiang family is planning to raise troops and rebel. It is ridiculous. Few people know that my brother has sent secret memorials to the capital several times, speaking of the troubles in the north and asking the emperor to send troops to drive away the Tatars. However, the emperor did not listen. He is afraid that after my brother expands the territory, he will make great achievements and it will be even harder to shake my Jiang family. She spoke indignantly. It was obvious that she had been dissatisfied with Emperor Zhao Qing for a long time and did not have the slightest bit of respect. She could not detect it herself, but Shui Rui understood. From her performance alone, he could see that the Jiang family's heart had been raised. From the perspective of the ruler of a country, Emperor Zhao Qing's actions could not be said to be right or wrong. If the Jiang family really had ambitions, then killing him in advance was not wrong. However, if the Jiang family did not have the intention to rebel and was forced into a corner, it was possible that they would rebel. Shui Rui had heard her indignant words, but he did not join her in despising the imperial court. Instead, he asked her, "Does Madame Wei know that you came to find me?" Jiang Ye nodded and suddenly became hesitant. "Actually, I came to find you today because I have something to ask of you." Shui Rui immediately understood, but he heard her say hesitantly, "Do you have a way to help us leave Anling?" Shui Rui did not answer. Jiang Ye looked at him anxiously. "I know it is difficult for you, but mother and I really have no other way. A few days ago, my brother sent us a letter by pigeon and asked us to ask you for help if we have nowhere else to go." In reality, Jiang Huaying flew over from Ningdong City and the first sentence on the letter was, pleading Zixin to leave Anling as soon as possible. To prevent the letter from being exposed, he deliberately used Shui Rui's previous alias, Chao Zixin. It must be said that he trusted Shui Rui's character very much by entrusting it to his closest relative. Shui Rui was Jiang Huaying's brother after all, and he had witnessed Jiang Huaying's unyielding temperament, so how could he not understand what Jiang Huaying meant? If Madame Wei and Jiang Mia were to leave Anling and return to Ningdong City, Jiang Huaying would no longer have any restraints, and he would be able to go all out and even defy the imperial decree. Let me think about it." Shui Rui rubbed his forehead and got up to get some fresh air outside. Jiang Huaying had really given him a difficult problem. Regardless of whether he had a way to send Madame Jiang and her daughter away, if he did not care about them, they would still try every possible way to leave the capital. Once they were discovered by others, they would not be able to escape. On the contrary, if he arranged for them to leave the capital, it would be no different from deceiving the emperor. If there was a day when the Jiang family rebelled, he would inevitably be held responsible. To go through water and tread on fire for the sake of brotherhood, or to be loyal to the emperor and betray the country, it was difficult for him to choose. Jiang Ye looked at his hesitant back and felt apprehensive. She walked forward and raised her hand in the air. She wanted to pat his shoulder and tell him that it was fine if he was in a difficult situation. However, when she thought of her mother's warning before she left, her hand fell again. Second brother. She called out in a low voice. Logically speaking, when Shui Rui and her imperial brother became sworn brothers, her imperial brother would request her to acknowledge Shui Rui as her brother. However, she felt uncomfortable in her heart, and she had always been unwilling. She insisted on calling him Shui Dalong over and over again in order to appear different. Think about it carefully. I've been out for too long today and must return. I will come find you in 3 days. After saying that, she was afraid that he would say something to reject her, so she hurriedly put on her bamboo hat to cover her face and left through the back door with her shoulder pole. Shui Rui watched as her figure disappeared behind the door, but in the end he didn't call out to her. He just stood in the courtyard until dusk. The 2 doors were pushed open once again, and Yu Shu entered while stepping on the orange-red glow. As soon as she saw him, she smiled. They had not seen each other for half a month. Now that she saw him, it was as if she had encountered something good. Even her footsteps became lighter. Chapter 731. Shui Rui told Yu Shu everything about Jiang Mia's visit in the afternoon. There were times when he couldn't make up his mind, and she was the only person he could confide in without any worries. I was wondering why you looked so worried. So it turns out that trouble has come knocking on your door. Yu Shu didn't like Jiang Mia, and she didn't care about the Jiang family's matters either. However, it was a different matter when it involved Shui Rui. You just want to help them, but you're afraid of causing a huge disaster. She saw through his thoughts with a single glance. Shui Rui nodded. Madame Wei isn't an ordinary woman. Even if I'm not willing to help her, she will still scheme to escape. However, this is easier said than done. If they fail to escape, His Majesty will definitely not let them off. How can I just sit and watch? However, if you help them escape from the capital, Prince of Dongjing won't have anything to worry about, and he might rebel in the future. At that time the country will be in chaos and you will become a sinner. Yu Shu continued. Shui Rui smiled bitterly. Jiang Huaying and I are bosom buddies and I know his character very well. In the beginning he was willing to send Madame Wei and Jiang Mia to the capital to show his loyalty to His Majesty. At that time he definitely didn't have any intention of rebelling. However, His Majesty actually used the Jiang family's mother and daughter to force him onto a path of no return. With his wisdom and bravery, there will definitely be chaos if he rebels in the future. This sounded like a dead end. If he didn't help Prince of Dongjing, the Jiang family might be finished, but if he helped Prince of Dongjing, he might become a sinner for all eternity. Since ancient times, it was difficult to be loyal and righteous, and this was probably the situation. Yu Shu didn't have a good impression of the Jiang family, and similarly, she didn't have any sense of belonging to the imperial court. Therefore, Shui Rui was a difficult problem, but for her, there was nothing to worry about. Then let me ask you, do you have a way to let the Jiang family's mother and daughter leave the capital safely? Shui Rui answered honestly, I am 70% sure. Yu Shu smiled and said, then it's easy. You don't have to be so stubborn. Since you're in a dilemma, it's wrong to help or not to help. Why don't you ask Heaven's will and let me do you a divination to see if you should help? When he first heard her idea, Shui Rui did not know whether to laugh or cry. But when he thought about it carefully, it was a good way to make a decision. Didn't mortals seek divination because they were worried about their future? Alright, I'll listen to you. Yu Shu and Shui Rui went back to the house on Baochang Street. She needed to use the 6 lines to calculate for him, and she needed to use the fake Taiching cauldrons burning Dahui incense. She took these 2 treasures back home and didn't dare to put them anywhere. After entering the main door, Yu Shu saw Zhou Hu and a few servants cleaning the living room from afar. She then glanced at the splashed water from the east side of the flower pond and immediately knew what was going on. The girl is back. Zhou Hu jogged forward, and when he saw Shui Rui who was traveling with her, he greeted him repeatedly. However, because Yu Shu didn't say anything, He didn't mention that there were officials coming to ask for her again today. Yushu walked to the backyard with Shui Rui. She did not say anything, but Shui Rui had to ask. Is Yin Zhorong still reporting you everywhere? He first heard it from Ruilin, and then later asked Yushu for details. Seeing that she did not care, he did not ask for help, but only secretly planned for her. Yushu sneered and said, let him report as he pleases. As long as my mother does not go to court, no matter how much evidence he has, it is useless. It was difficult for a commoner to report an official, but it was not easy for an official to report an official. She and Yin Zhorong were of the same rank. He could only use the normal channels to request that Aunt Chui be brought to trial, but she could use a loophole in the judicial system. The Da'an law stipulated that having an escaped slave and eloping was a serious crime, but the Da'an law also stated that those who had an identity card were good citizens. The parents of officials of 5th rank and above did not have to go to court, unless all 3 departments tried them together. This meant that Aunt Chui had the right to refuse to go to court, unless it was tried by the Supreme Court, the Ministry of Justice, and the Imperial Censorate. Yin Zhorong did not have the face to gather all 3 departments to stand up for him. The second branch of the Yin family insisted that Aunt Chui was their family's escaped slave, but Yushu had already gone through noble consort Shui to apply for an identity card for Aunt Chui in the Ministry of Revenue. So whenever an official came to ask for her, she could beat them all out without hesitation. This method was a little rogue, but who could say that she was wrong? Shui Rui saw her shrewd face and did not ask any more questions. He followed her to the study in the North Palace and waited for her to return to her room to change her clothes. He took out the small blue stove, washed his hands, and burned some incense. The 4 chapters of the 6 trigrams, affairs of the country, natural and man-made disasters, good or bad future, marriage and harmony. The things that Shui Rui wanted to ask could be counted as natural and man-made disasters, or it could also be counted as family, country, and the world. The former's Yao I was Shui Rui's birthday, month, and day, as well as the age of the sister of the person he was helping. The latter's Yao I was the zodiac sign of the person he was helping, and the birthday of the person's father. Fortunately, Shui Rui could answer all of these Yao I, otherwise Yushu would not be able to get a hexagram. From asking to arranging the hexagram, to calculating the details, 1 pill of Tishio incense was only enough for her to calculate 1 hexagram. For Shui Rui, she was not stingy. She used 2 pills to calculate the result. Yushu only explained to Shui Rui under his inquisitive gaze, the first divination is to obtain the fortune of one's wife. The divination of one's future is to be smooth, while the divination of one's choice is to seek benevolence. According to the matter you're asking about, you should help the mother and daughter of the Jiang family to leave the capital city. Shui Rui's face became serious unconsciously. What about the second hexagram? Yushu's fingers moved on the paper and she hesitated. The second hexagram is the Yao I for your brother. The divination of you is a tribulation. Those who are tribulation should value friendship and avoid greed. The divination of those who ask for help is a great kindness. From the hexagram, if you are worried about the world, you should help Lord Dongjing to get out of trouble. After she finished speaking, she was puzzled. Helping Lord Dongjing to get out of trouble was actually a good thing for the country and the people? She even suspected that she had miscalculated. She looked at Shui Rui's surprised eyes and touched her nose in embarrassment. She reached out to open the incense burner and said, "Why don't I calculate it again?" Although she had the Tihu incense, she couldn't calculate it 100% accurately. No need, Shui Rui already had a conclusion in his heart after he got her 2 hexagram. He pressed Yushu's hand and said, "When I became sworn brothers with Lord Dongjing, I swore to the heaven and earth that we would share blessings and misfortunes together. If you want me to break my promise, I can't do it." Hearing his statement, Yushu blinked and slowly curled up the corner of her mouth. "Big brother, if you have thought it through, then just do it. As a man, there are things that he should do and things that he shouldn't. I like your temperament of valuing friendship and promises." It was great that the person she liked was a true gentleman who kept his promise. Shui Rui suddenly heard her confession and couldn't help but laugh. He couldn't help but pinch her soft palm and replied softly, "My heart is the same." He also loved her character of valuing friendship and self-improvement. It could be said that the reason why the two of them could be in love with each other was not only because of fate, but more importantly because they were compatible. If he was a fickle villain or if she was a weak woman, they would not be able to be together. Yushu helped Shui Rui solve a problem, so she didn't care about how he would save Madame Wei and Jiang Mia. Instead, she thought of another person, Sidu Qinglan. At Madame Wei's birthday banquet, Sidu Qinglan won the limelight. It wasn't hard to guess what she was thinking. Everyone had their own fate, and Yushu wouldn't interfere with other people's futures, so she didn't say anything. But now, she felt that it was necessary to remind Sidu Qinglan and persuade her to give up on the idea. They were friends, so she couldn't just watch her jump into the fire pit. It should be known that in the eyes of others, Prince Dongjing's mansion was still in the glorious past. So, at noon the next day, Yushu took some time to go to Taisher Library to find Sidu Qinglan. "What kind of wind is blowing today? You actually have time to visit me." Sidu Qinglan was very surprised by Yushu's visit. At this time all the students in the library had gone to eat, and she was the only one who stayed in Sushuetang to clean. Yushu looked around and asked her, "Why are you sweeping the floor? Where are the servants?" She was a female disguise master, so why did she do such rough work? "Ah, don't mention it." Sidu Qinglan sighed while holding the broom. Not long ago one night, a group of Yulin royal guards broke into the library and searched inside and outside. I don't know why they kidnapped all the servants in the library. The academicians forbade us to talk about this in private. If I hadn't stayed over at night, I wouldn't have known about it. No one cleaned the lecture hall, so it was a mess in a few days. So, I had to do it myself. Yushu thought of the missing suspect mentioned by Jing Qin. The Yulin royal guards wouldn't break into Taisher Library without permission. They must be under the emperor's order to arrest people and track down clues. Wait for me, I'll be done soon. Sidu Qinglan quickly put the things in one place and went to the back of the room to wash her hands. After a while, she saw someone coming out with a stack of books and smiled at her apologetically. "I almost forgot that I have to go to the library to return these books." It turns out that Uncle Qin, who is responsible for taking care of these books, has returned to his hometown. Yushu's heart moved. Is Uncle Qin the old servant I always see in the library? The one with a little bad hearing? Yes. Yushu felt a little scared. She had seen that old servant more than once. If he was the murderer of the two female students, she was really lucky. They walked to Dianhan building while talking about trivial things. Yushu hadn't seen Xan Lu for a long time. According to Situ Qinglan's tone, Xan Lu didn't come to Taisher Library recently. It seemed that he had something else to do. There were 4 libraries in Taisher Library, and Dianhan building was only one of them. Because the servants were all taken away and there was a lack of people to take care of it, the academicians temporarily closed the library. Situ Qinglan got the door key from her grandfather and took Yushu to the 2nd floor. It was quiet everywhere and there was no one around. It was a good place to talk about something private. When she put down the things and came out, Yushu said, "Do you know that the emperor sent Lord of Dongjing to attack Japan?" Situ Qinglan was stunned and nodded hesitantly. "What do you think about it?" Yushu couldn't rashly tell her, "Don't dream about being Princess Dongjing anymore. The Jiang family is going to be in big trouble. Maybe they will become traitors in the future. The glory and wealth you think is actually a fire pit." Situ Qinglan was a smart person. She understood the meaning of Yushu's words. She wasn't surprised that Yushu could see through her mind. But she didn't know what to do. She just kept silent. Yushu shook her head slowly and said, "I shouldn't have said this." The emperor was afraid of the power of the Jiang family, so he detained Madame Wei and Commandery Princess Jiang in the capital to threaten Lord of Dongjing to go overseas. "It's dangerous here. It's enough to overthrow the Jiang family. Lord of Dongjing may not be willing to walk into the trap." Situ Qinglan suddenly raised her head and there was a trace of fear in her eyes. If Lord of Dongjing was not willing to walk into the trap, then she didn't dare to think about it anymore. "I'm telling you. It's good that you know what to do. Qinglan, calm down and make a plan. I'll go back first. If you need anything, come to the Celestial Commissioner." Yushu patted her on the shoulder and went downstairs. Chapter 732. In the blink of an eye, it was the middle of November. Yushu's court dress was ready. She wore a green and red brocade satin top with wide sleeves, lined with a white lined jacket. She had a green jade belt, a pair of tall silver boots, a black tasseled boxing crown, a fish talisman, and a silver necklace inlaid with 5-colored gems. Yushu tried it on her upper body. It was really handsome. Her hands and legs were long, and they could support such a stylish dress. It was cold and she wore a cotton-padded shirt and trousers inside, but she was still as tall and straight as a green bamboo. The court dress was usually more grand than the official dress and the regular dress. The iris flower patch on the shoulder was also decorated with pearls and colorful jade. When standing in a bright place it would shine and it was very beautiful. The court dress of female officials had been followed for 300 years. Probably influenced by Empress Ningxin, the style was eclectic. It not only had to be powerful, but also took into account the fashion of women. Yu Shu looked in the mirror and felt very satisfied. She wore this heavy dress and walked around the room. In the end, she felt bored and ran to Zhao Hui to show off. Io. Zhao Hui was in the eastern room asking old Madame He for some needlework tips. As soon as she saw Yu Shuqing walk in, her eyes widened. She had never seen such a splendid outfit before and couldn't help but gasp in surprise. Old Madame He was more knowledgeable than her. She squinted her eyes and said, "This is the dress that can only be worn when meeting the emperor. Good child, come closer and let grandma see it." Yu Shu answered with a smile and walked in front of the old lady so that she could look at it easily. Old Madame He took her hand and gently touched the patterns on her sleeves, afraid that she would break them if she used too much strength. After looking at Yu Shu from top to bottom, she said with satisfaction, "You're so beautiful. Your godfather's great-grandfather was a famous doctor in the capital a few decades ago. The late emperor made him a high-ranking official in the court of imperial physicians. He was a fourth-rank official. There's a portrait of the old man in the He family's ancestral home. The old man was wearing the clothes of a high-ranking official and a black hat on his head, just like what you're wearing now. The He family was a real family of Xinglin, so Yu Shu was very relieved to let Yu Xiaoshu learn medicine from He Fangji. In the future, she didn't expect him to be promoted and rich, but at least he wouldn't be a nobody. Old Madame He recalled the past for a while and talked about many old things intermittently. Zhao Hui and Yu Shu both listened carefully and no one interrupted. After all, old Madame He was old. After the excitement passed, she looked tired. Zhao Hui helped her lie down in the inner room and covered her with the quilt. She left and called Yu Shu to talk in the next room. "A few days ago your uncle came over and told me some things. I didn't get a chance to ask you since you were too busy to visit home." Zhao Hui pressed Yu Shu to sit down on the low couch, helped her smooth the wrinkles of her clothes, and put on a serious expression. Yu Shu said, "Go ahead and ask. What can we not say to each other?" Zhao Hui nodded and leaned close to her. She lowered her voice, "I heard from your uncle that young Master Shue's family is in trouble. It is said that someone slandered the Shui family for rebellion." Yu Shu thought, Shui Rui's movement is big enough. Even Zhao Hui, a woman in the backyard, knows that the Shui family has been wronged. I'm just a woman. I don't understand these things, but I do know that rebellion is a crime punishable by death. Zhao Hui looked a little scared. You and young Master Shui are sworn siblings. If something happens to his family, you won't be implicated, right? Everyone has selfishness. Yu Shu is like a daughter to Zhao Hui, but Shui Rui is just an outsider to Zhao Hui. So when she heard that the Shui family was in trouble, the first thing she worried about was whether Yu Shu would be harmed. She didn't have the idea of going through thick and thin with them. Yu Shu was thoughtful. She smiled and said, "Mother also knows about rebellion and the execution of 9 relatives. What is the meaning of 9 relatives? 4 relatives of the father's family, 3 relatives of the mother's family, and 2 relatives of the wife's family are called 9 relatives. Sworn siblings do not belong to this list. Moreover, since they are wrong, there is nothing to be afraid of. The current emperor is wise. He will never listen to the slander of villains and persecute loyal people." The last sentence was to comfort Zhao Hui. Fortunately, Zhao Hui was open-minded. She was relieved after listening to her explanation. Yu Shu returned to the room in a new court dress. Her mood was completely different from before. Since Shui Rui returned to the capital, they had met in private several times. There was a question that she had never asked, whether the Shui family had the intention to rebel. If they didn't, she would thank God. If they did, God would make a big joke. Whether Lord Dongjing would rebel or not had little to do with her. But if the Shui family wanted to rebel, she had to take it seriously. Thinking about it carefully, there were only 2 ways for an official to rebel. One was to gather troops and establish himself as the king, and the other was to support the new emperor to kill the old emperor. If Lord Dongjing wanted to rebel, he would definitely choose the former. If the Shui family wanted to rebel, they could only choose the second way. The new emperor that the Shui family wanted to support would undoubtedly choose Lu Tan, who was the daughter of noble consort Shui. So what was the motive of the Shui family to rebel? If Emperor Zhaoqing made Lu Tan the crown prince, there was no need for the Shui family to rebel at all. Unless Shui Lingnan had long been sure that Lu Tan could not be the crown prince. How could the Shui family be sure that Emperor Zhaoqing would not make Lu Tan the crown prince? Because Shui Lingnan also knew the existence of the Book of Mystery Fairies. Did he know the secret of the disaster? Yunhua said that without the Book of Mystery Fairy's 6 wrens, the future crown prince could not be divined. Could it be that Xue Lingnan knew that the Book of Mystery Fairy's 6 wrens was lost? So, he thought that as long as the great and calamity disappeared or the person who broke his life died, he could control the situation. If these speculations of hers were true, then the murderer of Taisha Shuyuan was most likely sent by the Xue family to kill the person who broke the life. In other words, Xue Lingnan wanted to kill her. Yushu's assumptions were clear. The more questions she had, the more frightened she was. She didn't dare to ask Xue Rui for confirmation. It was not because she was worried that those terrible speculations would come true, but she didn't want to make things difficult for Xue Rui. Just like Jiang Mia, who asked Xue Rui to choose between righteousness and loyalty, she didn't want Xue Rui to choose between love and the kindness of raising her. She couldn't possibly ask Xue Rui face to face, "Your grandfather wants to kill me, what do you plan to do?" Some words could not be taken back after they were said. She would rather play dumb and not expose him. Moreover, in her mind, Xue Rui was worthy of trust. She believed that he would give her an explanation sooner or later without her asking. On the second day after receiving the court dress, the great advisor brought Yushu to Taishi Tower to give her some instructions. He mainly explained to her the process of participating in the morning court. There was no need for him to personally instruct her on such a small matter, but he had always been fond of Yushu. Yushu would not be grateful for his special care, because she knew very well that in the eyes of her immediate superior, she was just a tool named the person who broke the life. Coming out of Taishi Tower, Yushu met someone on the way. "You knew you?" Xenia asked her with a smile. "Where are you going?" "Oh, Lady Xen." Yushu stopped and pointed to the south. "The great advisor called me over to talk." Xenia nodded knowingly and said, "If nothing goes wrong, you will be attending the morning court on the first day of next month, right?" "Yes." Yushu didn't like to deal with this old fox. It had been 4 months since their last private meeting. In order to ask her to predict Yunhua's life and death, Xenia took out the imitation Tai Ching cauldron to tempt her and tried to use Tihu incense to tie her down. She guessed that this old fox couldn't help but wait for a few days when she didn't take the initiative to look for him. As expected, Xenia followed the topic of the morning court and led in another direction. "My identity will be different when I attend the morning court. It won't be as leisurely as it is now. First, I will have more social contacts, and second, I will have to work hard to share my burden. You see, shouldn't you take advantage of the fact that you are not busy to do what you promised me as soon as possible?" With Xan Lishan, Yushu had solved the need for Tihu incense. Naturally, she didn't need to keep Xania in suspense anymore. So she pretended to pat her forehead and said, "Oh, look at my memory. The result of what you asked me to do was already out last month, but you didn't ask me. I thought you weren't in a hurry to know, so I didn't rush to look for you to fulfill it. After that, I got busy and forgot about it. Sorry, ha. Haha, your mother," Xania scolded in his heart. "Who said he wasn't in a hurry? He was so anxious that he almost died. If it wasn't because he wanted to wait for her to finish using Tihu incense and beg him, he wouldn't have had to hide from her for so many days." "There's a result? That's great. I just got some good tea the day before yesterday. Why don't you come back with me to the house later? We can sit down and enjoy the tea and slowly talk about it." Xania was able to keep his composure. He knew that this was not the place to talk. Yushu looked troubled. "But I have to go buy some tools this afternoon. I've used up all the turtle shells and ambergris at home." Xenia quietly gritted his teeth but pretended to be generous. "It's not worth much. The Xian family's great e-shop doesn't lack anything. Why do you need to make a trip? Come back with me. I'll get someone to prepare a set of white-headed turtle shells and a box of high-quality ambergris for you to take with you when you leave." Yushu whispered, "But I've always bought turtle shells that are more than 50 years old." A 50-year-old white-headed turtle shell was priceless. Usually it could only be sold for 300 taels. A set of 12 shells would be 3,600 taels. And that didn't include the ambergris. "Forget it. I'll go buy it myself," Yushu said considerately. "Lady Xen, let's talk another day." He turned to leave. Xenia hurriedly blocked his way. He forced a smile and said amiably, "Isn't it just a 50-year-old turtle shell? It's not that rare. I'll get someone to choose it. It'll save you the trouble of running around." Yushu said embarrassedly, "How can I do that? I've made you spend money. I'll thank Lady Xan then." This little bastard who took advantage of the situation. "Then when you're leaving, get someone to inform me at the Kunling Bureau. I'll go back first." Yushu waved her sleeves at him in a relaxed manner. Only a bastard would not take advantage of an opportunity. Moreover, Xinyu was such a despicable person. At the bottom of it all, it was Xinyu's fault for stealing the precious Zhuge Tong that Yunhua had given to Xanlishan. This indirectly caused Shui Rui's birth mother, Madame Han, to not be able to escape the Celestial Commissioner's pursuit and eventually lose her life. Chapter 733. When Yu Shu came out of the Xan family's mansion, the sky had just turned dark. Su Qing and Lu Hong followed closely behind, holding 2 big boxes in their hands. These were the thank you gifts that Xanya gave her. On the 6th of June she showed her death-sealing technique at the Hibiscus Gentleman's Banquet, which shocked the 12 families. Some people coveted her skills and some people tried to recruit her to be the signboard of the Dai shop, but she rejected them all. Xanya repeatedly showed her goodwill, and even used a replica of the Tai Ching cauldron as a trade in exchange for her divination of the life and death of a few people. The first person was a man born in the year of Xinyu. Xanya probably did not expect that Yu Shu would coincidentally guess that the original identity of this Mr. Xinyu was Yunhua's son. Yunhua did not die at all. Xanya was very sure that she had seen him in person, but she did not tell Xanya the truth. Instead, she made up a very credible story based on what happened 20 years ago. She told Xanya, "You asked me to divine that you have wealth but no life to enjoy it. In the first month of the 13th year of Baotai, because of a villain, your relatives died and there were signs of separation. In fact, at the end of the 12th year of Baotai, Yunhua sent Zhuge Tong to Xanlishan, but Xanya intercepted it and hid it. In the first month of the 13th year of Baotai, Yunhua's first wife, Madame Han, did a divination and knew that his wife had died, and his eldest son was missing. Xanya had a guilty conscience, so she believed it immediately. She said, in the 2nd month there was a fire and he did not die. In the 4th month he lost his wife. In the 6th month he died. He died in a foreign land. Yunhua told her personally that when he heard the bad news of Madame Han's death, he set fire to the Celestial Commissioner, stole the Book of Mystery Maiden and fled the capital city. The late emperor and the previous emperor had concealed the fact that Yunhua had stolen the treasure and escaped. Princess Liyue had passed away after giving birth to Jing Chen. After she died, the palace announced to the public that Yunhua had sacrificed his son for the princess, and the 2 of them were buried together in the princess mausoleum. Yu Shu was an expert in lying. After Xanya heard the results of Yu Shu's divination, she would definitely fill in the blanks on her own. Even if she was not 100% convinced, there was still a 99% chance that she was telling the truth. After leaving the Xian family, Yu Shu turned around and went to the Wangji Tower. She had managed to scare Xanya, but she still owed Xanlishan an explanation. Both father and son were very concerned about the truth of Yunhua's death in the past. Wang Jilu had been closed for several days, and the restaurant in front was not open for business. Lin Fu fired a few of the hired waiters and vegetable washers, and the rest of the people became idle. Xanlishan still refused to leave, treating this place as his refuge. After 2 months, he also realized that the waiters and servants in this restaurant were all skilled in martial arts. One of them could take on 3 people, so he was not afraid that Xanya would find out where he was and come to arrest him. Yu Shu finds Xanlishan on the balcony of the 3rd floor. He successfully extracted Tihu incense half a month ago. In exchange, Yu Shu allows him to visit the feng shui pool on the top floor. Xanlishan is an out-and-out scholar. She heard from Xiao Dai and Xiao Qing that he can squat in front of the feng shui pool without eating or drinking for 2 days and 2 nights to write and draw. On such a cold day, he actually made a mattress on the balcony just so that when the sun rises he can be the first to see the changes in the feng shui pool. 5th uncle, I have calculated the result of the matter that you entrusted to me. As soon as Yu Shu opens her mouth, Xanlishan, who was lying lazily on the side of the patio, immediately got up and offered his seat to her. Sit down and talk, sit down and talk. Yu Shu can deceive Xanya with a clear conscience, but she can't bear to deceive Xanlishan. Back then he was deceived by his father and missed the task that Yunhua entrusted to him. He inadvertently became a villain. However, after many years he found out the truth and resolutely broke off the relationship between father and son with Xanya, giving up a bright future and a rich family. The dignified first rank of Dayan rankings, a 3rd-class great changer and a celestial commissioner, but he is willing to conceal his identity and be a common man. Such a responsible 5th uncle Xian is a real man. Even if he knows that Yunhua is still alive, he will not leak it out. Facing Xen Lishan's eyes full of expectations, she did not keep him in suspense and told him directly, "The person that you want me to calculate, he is not dead." Xen Lishan's eyes widened, and his eyes were frighteningly bright. He grabbed Yushu's arm with a little excitement and asked, "If he is not dead, then he is still alive? You didn't make a mistake, right?" Yushu did not care about his doubt of her, but told him with certainty, "Yes, that person is still alive." Then she repeated what she said to Xenia, except that the last sentence, "He died in a foreign land, died a violent death," was changed to "His lifespan is not up, he is still alive." For a moment she saw tears glistening in Xen Lishan's eyes, and thought that she saw it wrong. When he turned his head to wipe his face, she realized that he was really crying. Xen Lishan's shrewdness was not inferior to his father's, but at this time he forgot to hide his emotions. As he wiped his tears he kept saying, "Great, great, he is not dead, he is not dead." Between him and Xenia, one hoped that Yunhua was alive, and the other hoped that Yunhua was dead. Yushu watched this scene coldly from the side. She thought that if she were Yunhua she would probably forgive Xen Lishan, but she would never let Xenia go. At the end of the month there was finally a good news that made people excited: Shui Rui was reinstated. This confused people who thought that the Shui family was going to fall. In this generation of the Shui family, Shui Rui was the only outstanding one among the descendants, and he was undoubtedly going to inherit Shui Lingnan's mantle in the future. Previously, Emperor Zhaoqing had personally asked about Shui Rui's disappearance and ordered him to be suspended from his post for investigation. Everyone saw this as a sign that the Shui family was going to be demoted. Now not only had Shui Lingnan returned to the court, but Shui Rui had also returned to the Supreme Court. Emperor Zhaoqing's action was thought-provoking. Most people felt that the Shui family was innocent victims, and now that they were cleared of suspicion, Emperor Zhaoqing would naturally be lenient. However, a few people noticed a detail. The cause of the whole incident, the Shui family's chief who was wanted by the emperor, had not been released yet. In any case, the Shui family's courtyard was bustling again these days, and it was not as quiet as it was half a month ago. When Yushu got the news, she immediately asked Zhou Hu to prepare a congratulatory gift and sent it to the right minister's residence. She was wary of Shui Lingnan, so she did not go in person. But the next day she went to the Supreme Court. The guards all recognized this young lady and let her pass. Yushu walked to the backyard with familiarity. On the way she also saw some officials playing chess and drinking tea in the warm pavilion. It was very leisurely, but when she found Shui Rui she saw another scene. Two writing tables were facing each other, and stacks of files and legal books were placed on top of them. There was only an empty corner where brush and ink were placed. Shui Rui sat at the edge of this corner, and the petty official and the registrar stood on both sides of him. They kept passing files into his hands, and after he finished reading one, they would find another one. If they had any doubts they would search for the legal books on the table. Yushu stood under the window and looked in for a while. She found that Shui Rui did not notice her at all, so she had to clear her throat and call out to him. "Why are you here?" Shui Rui was a little happy to see her. He put down his writing brush, told his subordinates and walked out the door. "You asked Hadaku to send me a letter yesterday, and I know that you have returned to the Supreme Court. Of course I have to come and see." Yushu raised her chin towards the room and said, "How did I know that you are so busy? It seems that I came at the wrong time." Shui Rui shook his head and said, "I have been idle for a month and many official matters have been delayed. The local authorities are waiting for the Supreme Court's warrant and approval. If I do not solve it quickly, it will pile up until next month, and I don't know how many unjust and false cases will occur." In the blink of an eye it was already Li Dong. He was wearing a cotton coat, but Yushu saw that there was a thin layer of sweat on his forehead. Not only did she feel sorry for him, but she also complained, "When you were suspended there was no one to defend you, and yet you have the nerve to pile up all these official matters. When you come back I will push all of them to you. You are not the only Zhaoqing in the Supreme Court. On my way here I have seen people who are so idle, but other than you, are they all dead people?" When she was angry her mouth was unforgiving. Shui Rui laughed involuntarily. If they were not in the yamen, he could not help but pinch her angry face. "What are you laughing at?" Yushu glared at him. "You have such a good temper and you let others bully you for nothing." Shui Rui pulled her along and walked a few steps further away so that the bystanders would not hear their conversation and gossip again. Today was different from the past. Even though he had returned to the Supreme Court, his power and influence were not as great as before. It was just that his heart was not here and he did not care. When you were in Kunling Bureau, didn't Jing Chen also do nothing and push everything to you? Do you feel wronged? He asked. How is that the same? Yu Shu rolled her eyes and said, he delegated power to me. The more I do, the more power I have. You are busy but you do not get any benefits. As an official in the Supreme Court, one was either clean and uncorrupted, offending people everywhere, or smooth and slick, with a body full of small braids. Shui Rui was clearly the former. He was smart but not worldly. He was probably the only clean person in the yamen. How can that be? Shui Rui smiled faintly and said, I get benefits, it's just that you can't see it. Yu Shu snorted coldly and was too lazy to argue with him. She took out a handkerchief from her sleeve and covered his forehead. Her tone was not so gentle as she said, no matter how busy you are not allowed to stay up late. The weather is cold and it is hard to recover from an illness. A cold fragrance assailed his nostrils. Shui Rui suddenly felt his mind clear. He caught her handkerchief and did not bear to wipe his sweat. He folded it twice and put it in his chest. He did not feel embarrassed at all. Yu Shu saw him hide her handkerchief in front of her and did not know whether to laugh or cry. She could not ask him for it back. There is something I forgot to tell you, she mentioned. On the 1st of next month I will be able to enter the palace for court. It will be just in time for you to resume your position and be my companion. Shui Rui smiled and said, I know. I will go pick you up that morning. Don't oversleep. The morning court began at 7 a.m. The civil and military officials had to rush to the palace gates before 7 a.m. and wait for the morning bell to enter the palace. Regardless of whether it was day of the month, whether it was windy or rainy, they had to stand outside for 2 hours. Those who were late and those who were absent would be recorded by the censors in charge of inspection. So whenever there was a court meeting, the officials would wake up in the middle of the night to wash up and leave before dawn. Chapter 734. On the first day of the month, Yu Shu woke up before the 5th watch. When she opened her eyes, it was pitch black outside the window. Even though she had washed up and slept after eating last night, she still felt dizzy waking up so early. Hearing a servant girl coughing outside, she put on her clothes and called for someone to come in and serve. Ever since she had moved to a large residence, she had gradually adapted to the days of food and clothing being handed to her. Last night it was Exiner who kept watch. After Yu Shu woke up, Yundo and Liner came to take her place. They had already prepared hot water and tea and were busy helping Yu Shu wash and change. It took less than an hour for her to dress. Yu Shu stood at the door of the room and looked at the dark courtyard. She truly felt that she had woken up early. It was the beginning of winter and the morning was particularly cold. She put on a black cloak with fur over her court clothes and wrapped up her sleeves as she walked out of the north wing. Liner was in front with a lantern. When she reached the front courtyard and walked down the corridor, she saw a dark figure standing in front of the living room door. She thought that it was Shui Rui who had come early. Who would have thought that it was Jing Chen who had come early? Her steps paused and she asked in surprise, You are? I know that you are going to the palace today, so I came to pick you up. Jing Chen had a magnanimous bearing, but his eyes were helpless when he looked at her. When he heard that Shui Rui had returned to Jing, he wanted to talk to her, but she uncharacteristically avoided him. Every time he went to Kunling Bureau to find her, she was so busy that she could not leave. When he went to the food to see her, she was always not at home. Jing Chen did not understand why she would avoid him. After thinking about it, the reason could only be Shui Rui. Yu Shu walked around him guiltily and entered the living room. Sitting down, she said, Don't you not attend court? Jing Chen's position as the right commander was temporary. Emperor Zhaoqing was very generous to him. No one required him to attend court, so he never participated in government affairs. I was worried about you, so I made a request to the chief. Jing Chen walked into the room and stared at her. I wanted to tell you this a long time ago, but you always avoided me. He was indeed worried about Yu Shu because he felt that Shui Rui was not reliable. He was afraid that Yu Shu would trust Shui Rui too much and lose the ability to judge right from wrong. He spoke too bluntly and Yu Shu did not know how to respond. It was true that she was avoiding him because she was worried that if they met in private, Jing Chen would ask her about the details of Shui Rui's disappearance. She could not tell him the truth that it was Yunhua's scheme, so she could only avoid meeting him. Jing Chen was about to ask her if she was avoiding him because of Shui Rui, but he suddenly stopped and turned to look in the direction of the door. Yu Shu saw his movement and also looked out. After a while she saw Shui Rui, who was wearing a dark green cloak, slowly walk out of the darkness. He stopped at the door of the living room and looked at the two people in the room. His eyes flickered and he smiled slightly. I saw the carriage of the princess's mansion on the side of the road just now. I thought I was mistaken, but it is really Brother Jing. Jing Qin did not move and also said, I have just arrived just a little earlier than Brother Shui. Shui Rui nodded. He turned around and said to Yu Shu in a gentle voice, I was thinking that you woke up early and did not have the appetite to eat, so I went to the building of forgotten machines on the way to get some breakfast. There's hot porridge and side dishes. You should eat some to fill your stomach later on the journey. Otherwise, you won't be able to endure when you enter the palace. Jing Qin did not fall behind and honestly said to Yu Shu, I have also prepared food for you. After saying that, he thought for a while and added, Last month when I was refining pills there was a kind of vitality pill that is very good. It can refresh the mind, so I brought it for you today. Thank you for your trouble, Brother Jing. Shui Rui cupped his hands and thanked him, and then he turned around and said to Yu Shu, Little girl, why didn't you tell me beforehand that you're going to meet Brother Jing? If I'm late, then wouldn't I be making him wait? It is not her fault that she did not tell you. I did not expect you to come, I thought you were suspended. Jing Qin did not know how to be reserved. Brother Jing's ears are not very good. I have been reinstated a few days ago. Shui Rui also gradually became impolite. Yu Shu listened to them talking one after another, treating her as a decoration. She glanced at Jing Qin and then looked at Shui Rui. She suddenly felt a headache. She knew that the first morning court would not be peaceful, but there was no need for such a strong smell of gunpowder so early in the morning. She suddenly stood up and walked out. You guys have a good chat, I am leaving first. Shui Rui and Jing Qin looked at each other and turned their heads away. At the same time they thought, who wants to chat with him? The two carriages drove side by side and only slowed down when they reached the foot of the palace. There was a long queue outside the Meridian Gate. They did not join the queue and slowly stopped at the back. Yu Shu sat in Shui Rui's carriage. She lifted a corner of the curtain and looked outside. The cold wind rushed in. She quickly put it down and turned to Shui Rui and said, Look, we are late. We are all lagging behind. No matter how early you are, you will not be at the front of the queue. Shui Rui slowly moved the wine pot away from the charcoal stove. He tested the temperature of the wine, poured a cup and handed it to her, saying, Drink a few mouthfuls to warm yourself. When the palace gates open we will have to stand outside for a long time. The queue outside the palace gates was not casually lined up. For example, Yin Tianho and Shui Lingnan, no matter how late they were, could directly be at the front. For the fifth-rank officials, no matter how early they were, they could only make room for others. Shui Rui took out another half a pot and opened the small window at the corner of the door. He said to the manservant outside the carriage, Send it to the Jing Gongzi next to me. It was not easy for them to come before dawn to block people. Unfortunately, it was useless no matter how early they came. There was no medicine for regret in this world. If they missed it, they missed it. Yu Shu curled up her legs and leaned against a soft pillow while holding the little honey-yellow wine cup in her palm, and she looked at Shui Rui with an amused expression. She'd noticed that he was being petty, but when she thought of the blood relationship between him and Jing Qin, her feelings couldn't help but become complicated. Speaking of which, the sudden change in the Shui family started from the portrait that Jing Qin had painted. But if she really looked into it, what did Jing Qin do wrong? He was also a victim. They were originally blood brothers, but they had no choice but to go their separate ways. It was not easy to turn hostility into friendship. The east was slightly white. There was a burst of bell ringing in the distance. When the palace gates opened, the stream of people and horses slowly moved forward. When they were about to reach them, Shui Rui said to Yu Shu, Take off your cloak. You can't wear this in the palace. Let's get out of the carriage and take a few steps to stretch our hands and feet. Yu Shu nodded as she obediently took off her cloak and placed it at the side, revealing the exquisite and gorgeous imperial court attire on her body. She adjusted the gemstone necklace on her neck and touched the tasseled crown on her head to make sure that her attire was appropriate. Only then did she jump off the carriage and take 2 steps forward. When she noticed that Shui Rui wasn't following her, she turned around and collided with his jet black and bright eyes. She smiled. She also knew that she was dressed beautifully. Women were proud of those who liked them. His behavior was very pleasing to her. The two of them got out of the carriage and walked. Jing Qin silently followed them. The Meridian Gate was heavily guarded. The civil and military officials entered with fish talismans. When they left the palace, they also had to show their fish talismans. Walking under the palace wall, Shui Rui told Yu Shu in a low voice a true story. A few years ago, there was an unlucky man who forgot to bring his fish talisman. He was afraid that he would miss the morning court session, so he tried to bribe the imperial guards to let him enter the palace. However, the Jinwu guards who were guarding the gate did not recognize him, so they caught him on the spot. When the news reached the emperor's ears, he just said one sentence and that unlucky man was banished to Yunnan. After listening to this story, Yushu remembered it. She carefully fastened 2 buttons on the fish talisman on her belt, for fear that she would accidentally lose it. The eunuch who led the way led them to an open space in front of the palace gate. Several high-ranking officials and nobles went inside to drink tea, while the others had to stand outside in the cold wind. Yushu roughly counted. There were no less than 200 people here. Looking around, she was the only woman, which was really eye-catching. Before entering the palace, everyone took off the cloaks they used to keep warm and only wore court clothes to meet the emperor. The weather was really cold, so everyone wore a layer of cotton-padded clothes, which made them look much fatter than they were. However, she stood out from the crowd. She wore heavy court clothes, but her shoulders were still straight. Her oval face was pink and white from the cold. She was a woman's beauty, but when she raised her eyebrows, she added a bit of heroic spirit. People couldn't help but look at her a few more times, and an inappropriate description popped up in their minds: an elegant and handsome young man as beautiful as a jade tree in the wind. Such a young and energetic girl appeared in the middle of a group of old men, unexpectedly becoming a dazzling scenery. What's more, there were 2 young and handsome men standing next to her. One was gentle and elegant, and the other was handsome and outstanding. They were in the prime of their youth, making people envious. The court meeting was very different from what Yushu had imagined. She thought that the emperor would sit on the dragon throne and give orders, and the ministers would take turns to report their work. Then if there was a report, the court would be dismissed. But in reality, the liveliness of the morning court meeting was no less than the market. The idea of reporting work was simply too naive. The reality was that out of every 3 officials who opened their reports, 2 of them complained. Official Fang of the Chamberlain of Honglu said that this year, the offerings sent to the capital by the military governor of Heshi were 20% less than in previous years, so he accused official Zhang of the Ministry of Rights of overstepping his authority and embezzling the offerings. The Marquis of Kaiyang reported official Wang of the Ministry of Works to repair the residence of High Duke Feng's family. All the broken bricks and tiles were piled up at the back door of their house, blocking the road. No matter how big or small the matter was, without exception, they were all disputes that the Yamen could not solve. Yushu listened dumbfounded for a while and suddenly realized, so the emperor was a judge of cases. She and Shui Rui were both 5th-ranked officials, so their positions were close to the back and they were not far from each other. In front, the Marquis of Kaiyang and High Duke Feng were arguing until their necks were red. Whispers could be heard everywhere in the hall. Some said that the Marquis of Kaiyang was making a big fuss over a minor issue, while others said that High Duke Feng was being unkind. When no one was paying attention, she rolled her eyes. Coincidentally, Shui Rui saw it. He clenched his fist and coughed twice, reminding her not to cause trouble. Seeing that the Marquis of Kaiyang and High Duke Feng were about to roll up their sleeves and fight, Emperor Zhaoqing gave Ying Jiuping a look, telling him to sound the whip for silence. He opened his golden mouth and decided this matter. He gave High Duke Feng 3 days to clean up the back door of the Marquis of Kaiyang's residence and find official Wang of the Ministry of Works a month's salary. Then all the ministers cheered, "Your Majesty is wise." Just as Yushu was about to fall asleep from boredom, figures suddenly moved in the front row. 3 people stepped out and knelt in front of the emperor. The leader said in a loud voice. Chapter 735. Yushu felt that she was the first person in the history of Da-en to be impeached on the first day of the morning court session. Of the 3 officials who came forward to accuse her, the leader was the imperial censor, Wang Jiao. The other 2 were Lu Tong, the Northern Yamen's magistrate, and Yin Zhorong, the assistant minister of revenue, who was the plaintiff. The 3 of them sang the same tune. They first described how Yushu's mother, Suiping, eloped with scholar Yu more than 10 years ago and stole some of the Yin family's belongings. Now that Yushu had gained power, Suiping fearlessly went to the Yin family and flaunted her power at the assistant minister's residence, angering Madame Yin to the point of illness. Yin Zhorong could not bear it and sent a steward to the Yamen to complain. Who knew that Yushu would ignore the law and beat up the officials who came to interrogate her, brazenly shielding her mother and refusing to plead guilty. Yin Zhorong talked about how his wife, Madame Yin, had been humiliated by a servant who had run away from home years ago and was so angry that she was bedridden. His face was full of shame and his eyes were red. Those who heard it felt indignant and those who saw it felt sympathetic. In the end, Imperial Censor Wang spoke righteously and vehemently. Mother Yu was of lowly birth and actually committed the scandal of eloping with someone. She and Father Yu did not have an illicit relationship. As the saying goes, like mother, like daughter. Mother Yu is a sinful servant. How can Yu Shu be qualified to enter the court as an official? After Assistant Minister Yin reported her, if she did not have a guilty conscience, why would she beat up and drive away the officials? This official believes that the female Celestial Commissioner, Yu Shu, deliberately concealed her birth and disrupted the court. She is deceiving the emperor and should be severely punished. This official agrees. Lu Zhizhong was equally righteous. Please, Your Majesty, give me justice. Yin Zhorong had a bitter and vengeful expression. Emperor Zhaoqing sat high up on the dragon throne. Only eunuch Ying, who was nearby, could clearly see his slightly gloomy expression. He didn't dare to look too long. He shifted his gaze and then stared steadily at the civil and military officials below. The buzzing sounds of discussion traveled into his ears. Only the old officials at the head of the group looked down, as if the matter had nothing to do with them. Yu Shu listened attentively to the distortion of the facts by the trio. Her face did not change at all, but her heart was full of vile thoughts. Beside her, a colleague of the Celestial Commissioner asked her in a low voice, "Official Yu, this can't be true, right? Is there some kind of misunderstanding?" Thanks to the aquatic conference, Yu Shu had a very high reputation among the Celestial Commissioner. The officials present did not listen to the censor's side of the story. Someone immediately lowered his voice and reminded Yu Shu, "If there's any misunderstanding, Official Yu, quickly come out to defend yourself. Don't just stand there." Yu Shu cupped her hands and thanked the other for his good intentions, but she didn't rush out rashly to fight with the censor. She wasn't guilty, so what was there to panic about? Didn't the emperor say anything? She had calculated that there would be trouble today, but she didn't expect that Yin Zhorong would find a censor from the Imperial Censorate to directly impeach her. This was too ignorant. Didn't they use their brains to think that Emperor Zhaoqing would be happy to see the female emissary he had personally appointed become a criminal who deceived the emperor? Yu Shu felt slightly annoyed and unconsciously turned her head to look at Shui Rui. She saw that he was looking in the direction of Yin Zhorong and the others. Sensing her gaze, he turned back to look at her with a calm gaze. He shook his head slightly as if telling her to calm down. Yin Zhorong knelt on the ground. He didn't wait for Emperor Zhaoqing to speak for a while, but he didn't dare to raise his head to look. Sweat gradually appeared on his forehead. He knew that he was taking a risk out of desperation. The emperor might not want his female emissary Miaoling to be impeached. However, he had no other choice. Wang Jiao was a stubborn person. Not long ago, he had paid a visit to Wang Jiao's house and exaggerated the relationship between his family and Yu Shu. Wang Jiao could no longer sit still and had taken the initiative to interfere in this matter. Thinking that he had investigated the truth, he thought that Yu Shu was a treacherous official, shouting that he would expose her true colors in front of the emperor. This was exactly what he wanted, but he didn't expect that Shui Rui would suddenly return to the capital. He also didn't expect that the emperor wouldn't continue to suppress the Shui family. Instead, he allowed Shui Lingnan and Shui Lingnan to return to court. That groundless case of treason seemed to have been solved just like that. He had even tried to make an issue of the relationship between Yu Shu and Shui Rui to make the emperor vent his anger. He wasn't willing to let Yu Shu off just like that. Moreover, Wang Jiao was eager to show off and kept urging him to do it. He steeled his heart and simply chose to present the memorial on the morning of the first day of the imperial court session, catching her off guard. It wasn't that he didn't have a plan. Even if the emperor was biased, it couldn't be too obvious under the eyes of the public. As long as the emperor opened his mouth to question the case, he was confident that he could pin that girl to death. Yin Zhorong stood in the middle of the aisle. Coincidentally, next to him was Jing Chen. He was more sensitive than an ordinary person and caught the sinister calculation that flashed across Yin Zhorong's face. He frowned and moved. He was about to step forward to defend Yu Shu, but the purple-robed and golden-ribboned official standing at the very front opened his mouth before him. "Reporting to Your Majesty, this official has something to say regarding the Celestial Commissioner." Jing Chen stopped in his tracks and retracted his leg that had just stepped out. On the dragon throne, Emperor Zhaoqing turned his body sideways and raised his hand without a word, indicating for him to speak. The official first looked down at Yin Zhorong, then slowly said, "The person that Censor Wang wants to impeach is a female imperial official of our Kunling Bureau, a female fortune teller with 2 ranks and 3 first rank. She graduated from the Dian examination. Although the Celestial Commissioner doesn't stick to one pattern, she won't abuse her authority. Before every official takes office, the Minister of Tai Cheng will conduct a check. Those who don't have a clean background and are of good character will not be appointed. This official sincerely requests Your Majesty to investigate. These words were tantamount to warning others. If you want to impeach Yu Shu, you are accusing me, the Celestial Commissioner, of negligence? Yin Zhorong secretly complained. He had no intention of dragging the Celestial Commissioner down. It was all Wang Jiao's own decision to say those words and provoke this great Buddha. What should he do? He didn't dare to challenge the official, but that didn't mean others didn't dare. Without waiting for him to smooth things over, Censor Wang stiffened his neck and said, "You must have been deceived by someone, so you don't know her background. This lowly official has investigated clearly beforehand. This Yu Nuyu's birth mother remarried after her father's death and became a concubine of a wealthy family. She is truly shameless and unscrupulous. Later, her stepfather's family was in trouble and her mother sneaked out. She hid her and waited until the storm died down. Then, she went to the Ministry of Revenue to tamper with her household registration in order to curry favor with Imperial Consort Nyang Nyang at the Hibiscus Gentleman's Banquet. She thought that she could deceive everyone and enjoy her wealth with a clear conscience. She didn't know that Assistant Minister Yin's house still has her mother's contract of sale. The Ministry of Revenue also has a record that can be found." He was full of confidence. Seeing that the official was silent, he thought that he had nothing to refute and raised his voice even louder. "This official dares to guarantee that everything I said just now is the truth. Does the official dare to guarantee that Yu Shu is innocent?" The great hall was silent for a moment. Everyone shut their mouths at the same time and stared at Imperial Censor Wang, whose face was glowing red. Imperial Censor Wang enjoyed the feeling of being the center of attention and couldn't help but feel his blood boil. It was as if he could already see the future. Because he dared to admonish the Emperor and confront the Celestial Commissioner Celestial, his reputation would skyrocket and he would be highly regarded by the Emperor. He would be promoted to the position of Imperial Censor, just like those upright officials recorded in the history books who would rather die than submit, unafraid of the nobles and prime ministers. Yin Zhorong. Idiot. Yu Shu. Idiot. The civil and military officials. Idiot. Even the entire Imperial Censor wouldn't dare to go against the official. A mere 4th-ranked deputy Imperial Censor actually dared to challenge the official. If he wasn't an idiot, then what was he? The official stood at the front of the hundreds of officials. He didn't move at first, but when Wang Jiao finished speaking, he stepped forward and bowed to Emperor Zhao Qin. He said, "Everyone knows that Yu Nuyu is His Majesty's bestowed the title of Messenger Miaoling. If her character and background are flawed, then she has failed to live up to His Majesty's expectations. If news of this gets out, it would be a disgrace to the Emperor's dignity and should be punished severely. However, if there are people who maliciously slander her and have ill intentions, they cannot be let off. His Majesty, please issue an edict to have the 3 departments investigate the matter and reveal the truth." These words sounded just, but Yin Zhorong was trembling with fear. The situation was already out of his control. He turned to look at the righteous Wang Jiao. It was too late for regrets. "My beloved official's words are reasonable." Emperor Zhao Qing nodded. He looked down the stairs and read through the heads row by row. Finally, his eyes stopped on a person in the 3rd row from the back. He said slowly, "Where is Messenger Miaoling?" From afar, Yu Shu quivered and jogged out of the ranks. "Your humble servant is here. I kowtow to Your Majesty." After waiting for a long time, it was finally her turn to speak. "You heard someone impeaching you just now. We ask you, do you have anything to say?" Emperor Zhao Qing had to squint to clearly see the figure kneeling on the ground. "Reporting to Your Majesty." Yu Shu took a deep breath and raised her head, revealing a calm face. She said in a loud and clear voice, "If you wish to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext." A few steps ahead, Yin Zhorong's back stiffened. Imperial Censor Wang turned to glare at her. The official turned sideways and glanced at her with a smile. "Good." Emperor Zhao Qing nodded in satisfaction. He said, "Then we will allow the official to submit a memorial and set this as a case. We will order the Supreme Court, the Ministry of Justice, and the Imperial Censorate to conduct a joint investigation. We must find out the truth." As he said this, his gaze swept across the crowd and his finger pointed in the air. He paused and said, "We will send Vice Minister Shui of the Supreme Court, Assistant Minister Li Yuqing of the Ministry of Justice, and Imperial Censor Wang of the Imperial Censorate to conduct a joint investigation. The three people whose names were called had different expressions. The first to stand up to receive the decree was Assistant Minister Li of the Ministry of Justice, followed by Shui Rui. Finally, there was trouble with Imperial Censor Wang. Your Majesty, you must not do this. Lord Shui of the Supreme Court and Yu Shu are sworn siblings. This is known to all. How can we ask him to participate in the investigation? Shui Rui lowered his head and did not speak. He heard Emperor Zhaoqing snort coldly and say unhappily, "That is why we have asked the three departments to conduct a joint investigation and supervise each other." Your Majesty is wise. The official took the lead to praise. The Celestial Commissioner and the others echoed and immediately suppressed Imperial Censor Wang's protest. With the situation developing to this point, Yu Shu was half happy and half worried. She was happy that Emperor Zhaoqing was protecting her. Looking at the three people in the joint investigation, there was no need to talk about Shui Rui. Assistant Minister Li of the Ministry of Justice was her neighbor. She was worried because Yin Zhorong had several pieces of hard evidence in her hands. No matter how she looked at it, she looked like the unreasonable person. Just as she was worrying, another enemy stood out in front of her. It was Ning Wang Lu Hao, who wanted her dead. Fu Huang Rong Bing, Ning Wang said solemnly, just as the official said, this case concerns Fu Huang's authority. This son requests to supervise the trial. Chapter 736. 3 chapters in 1. In the end, Ning Wang had managed to get the job of supervising the trial. Emperor Zhaoqing was always especially easy to talk to when facing this son. No matter how unwilling Yu Shu was, it was not her place to object. Once it was 7 in the morning, Emperor Zhaoqing yawned and Ing Jioping announced the end of court. Usually, if there were no important matters of state that needed to be discussed, the morning court session would end in 2 hours. If there was something unfinished or something that was inconvenient to mention in public, they would hand in the memorials at the end of court session to be sent to Tian Hall for the emperor to read. The crowd moved out of the hall from the front to the back. The old officials walked at the front. Prime Minister Yin passed in front of Yin Zhorong and paused for a moment. He turned his head to look at him expressionlessly and sighed lightly without saying anything. Yin Zhorong could hear a lot of dissatisfaction in his father's sigh and chased after him in a panic. Coming out of the palace gates, Prime Minister Yin turned his head and saw the Shu son following pitifully behind him. He couldn't bear it and beckoned for him to come over. Yin Zhorong acted as if he had been pardoned and hurriedly ran forward to help him onto the carriage. Outside the palace gates, Shui Rui saw Yin Zhorong sit in Prime Minister Yin's carriage and drive away. He turned his head to ask the absent-minded Yu Shu, "Are you still going back to the Celestial Commissioner?" Yu Shu nodded. On the first day, it was not her turn to rest. After the morning court session, she still had to go to the Celestial Commissioner to work. Furthermore, the Great Minister had stood up for her during the morning court session. She had to go back to thank him and give an explanation. "That's good, I also have to go back to the Supreme Court." Shui Rui looked at Jing Qin, who was walking behind her, and cupped his hands. He said, "I will have to trouble Jing Xiong to send a Shu to the Celestial Commissioner on the way." Yu Shu had gone out in the morning on Shui Rui's carriage. Originally, Shui Rui should have sent her back, but the emperor had just decreed for the joint trial of the 3 departments. In public, Shui Rui had to be careful to avoid arousing suspicion. This was not the time to be jealous. "All right." Jing Qin agreed. Shui Rui lowered his head and said something to Yu Shu before walking away. Jing Qin walked to Yu Shu's side. "Let's go too." Yu Shu nodded and did not refuse. She followed him to the carriage of the Princess Mansion and went to the Celestial Commissioner's office. The two of them sat in the enclosed carriage, speechless, and the atmosphere was a little strange. Yu Shu closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. Jing Qin thought for a while and took the initiative to speak. "If there's anything I can help with, just say it." Yu Shu opened her eyes. She knew that he had good intentions, but this matter could not be explained in a few words. She said to him, "It's a long story. My mother used to be a maid in the Yin family, but she did not elope with my father. Instead, the Yin family betrothed her to my father. My mother followed my father back to his hometown. As for what Assistant Minister Yin said in front of the emperor today, it was pure nonsense. He deliberately wanted to slander my mother and me. What was even more ridiculous was that Imperial Censor Wang. He was like a vicious dog that would pounce and bite anyone he saw. In the end, he stole the spotlight and suppressed Yin Zhorong's limelight. Why does Assistant Minister Yin's family always make life difficult for you? Jing Qin frowned. Last time when he and Shui Rui attended the opera in Hengwu building, they encountered a young master of Assistant Minister Yin's family slandering Yushu in public. In the end, Shui Rui came forward and arrested him and took him back to the Supreme Court. Yushu frowned and did not know where to start. She had a long history of grievances with Yin Zhorong's family. At first, there were only some small conflicts, so she did not take it to heart. It was all because of Yin Deng. She was so vicious that she schemed to destroy her reputation. When her plan failed, she instigated her stupid son to slander her outside. In the end, Yin Zhorong personally went to court and publicly wanted to impeach her. It seemed that he would not stop until she was dead. She also did not understand why they were so crazy. They could not get any benefits from her once or twice, but they just did not learn to be obedient and insisted on fighting with her to the death. What a crazy family. In another carriage, Prime Minister Yin was scolding his son. It's not a small matter to impeach an official of the imperial court. What's more, Envoy Miao Ling is the servant of the Celestial Commissioner and is favored by the Emperor. Why didn't you discuss it with me before you did it? Yin Zhorong bowed his head and admitted his mistake honestly. I was impulsive and did not consider it thoroughly. Prime Minister Yin said with a cold face, you are not a child anymore. You always do things without thinking. No matter how big the hatred between you and her is, you can't solve it in private. Why do you have to bring it to the imperial court and make a joke of yourself? Yin Zhorong's face was full of grief and indignation. I had no choice. Yushu really bullied me too much. 2 months ago, Yuanbo was framed and imprisoned by Shui Rui in the Supreme Court. I was too ashamed to plead with you, so I swallowed my anger. Who knew that he was tortured in there? Because he was not treated in time, his manhood was damaged. This is a great hatred that will lead to the end of the family line. Prime Minister Yin was shocked and almost knocked over the teacup in his hand. He had heard that Yin Yuanbo was arrested and imprisoned in the Supreme Court. But because his grandson was disappointing and fooled around outside all day long, he wanted to let him suffer a little and sharpen his temper, so he didn't care about it. He didn't expect that the gentle and sensible Dalong of the Shui family could be so cruel. Once Yin Zhorong had spoken, he simply began to complain tearfully, Yuanbo is his mother's flesh and blood. Even the few doctors we hired couldn't save him, so Madame Deng fell ill. After Yuanbo found out, he locked himself in his room and refused to eat or see anyone. The family was in a mess. I was really angry, so I sent someone to the Yamen to complain. You are also a father, so you should know that in a father's heart, I can't allow my son to suffer even the slightest grievance. Prime Minister Yin's face darkened and he felt uncomfortable. No matter how disappointing Yin Yuanbo was, he was still his grandson. He couldn't sit and watch him be murdered. He knew that Yin Zhorong was playing tricks on him, but he couldn't ignore it. Tell me in detail what happened to Yushu's birth mother? Yin Zhorong's eyes flickered. He was afraid that Prime Minister Yin wouldn't help him if he told the truth. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to hide the truth and lied. Xiao Chui was originally a servant girl in my mother's room. More than 10 years ago, I married a wife and separated from her family. My mother gave that servant girl to Madame Deng. Coincidentally, during that year's imperial examinations, I helped a few poor students. One of them was Scholar Yu. His essay was very good and I found him agreeable. I invited him to our home as a guest and temporarily arranged for him to stay in the outer courtyard. That was how I planted the seeds of disaster. He clenched his teeth in anger as if he couldn't bear it anymore. Scholar Yu actually had an affair with that servant girl. When Madame Deng found out, she was already pregnant. At first, I was so angry that I wanted to beat that lowly servant girl to death. It was Madame Deng's kindness that persuaded me to let them go and let them go. Unexpectedly, Scholar Yu was ungrateful and bribed the servants in the inner courtyard to steal Xiao Chui. He took all of Madame Deng's belongings and eloped with her. I felt that it was embarrassing, so I didn't say anything. He spoke as if he was telling the truth. Prime Minister Yin didn't suspect that his son dared to lie to him, so he believed him. He stroked his beard and pondered for a while. He asked, "What evidence do you have?" "I have a contract to sell myself, an old maid in Madame Deng's room, and an old doctor who diagnosed that lowly servant girl's pregnancy. They can all prove it. Otherwise, when I went to the Ministry of Revenue to register, as long as I looked through Chen Yu's case, I would be able to find records of the servant girl's elopement." Prime Minister Yin raised his eyelids and snorted, "Chen Yu's case? I'm afraid you added it to the list. More than 10 years ago, Before Yin Zhorong took up a position in the Ministry of Revenue, a servant girl ran away from home. How could he think of going to the Ministry of Revenue to record such a small matter? Yin Zhorong mumbled twice, his heart beating faster. He was afraid that his father would hear something wrong, so he hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. Father is wise, nothing can be hidden from you. Prime Minister Yin stared at him, exasperated that he didn't live up to his expectations. Since you were young, you have loved to play petty tricks. No matter how old you are, you can't change this bad habit. When you cause trouble, you still need me to clean up your mess. Yin Zhorong was so embarrassed that his ears turned red. He was afraid that if he were to be scolded a few more times, he would confess everything, so he changed the topic. Originally, I had full confidence that I could win this case, but His Majesty is clearly biased towards that girl. He actually ordered a joint trial between the 3 departments. The 2 assistant ministers of the Ministry of Justice are Xue Shu's clique, and Xue Rui is Yu Shu's sworn brother. Imperial Censor Wang is a muddle-headed person, he might let her off the hook. Prime Minister Yin mocked him. Looks like you aren't too stupid, you know who the emperor is biased towards. Tell me, how do you want me, your father, to help you? Son is thinking, since His Majesty has given Ning Wang permission to supervise the trial, then it will be easy. I beg Darren Father to speak on behalf of Son in front of Ning Wang, to have him keep an eye on Xue Rui and the others in court, not being biased. At the crucial moment, if he can put in a few good words for me, then there will be nothing to worry about. In name, Yin Zhorong was Lu Hao Jiujiu of Ning Wang, but he was a Shu son, and his birth mother was only a Yinyang of Prime Minister Yin. In the palace, Shu Feinyang was the daughter of the Di mother, and her relationship with him, the Shu brother, was ordinary. So he didn't have much face in front of Ning Wang. Superfluous action, Prime Minister Yin lectured him. You brainless, why do you think Ning Wang requested for this job? It's because he's worried that you will be taken advantage of during the trial and affect our family's reputation. There's no need for this old man to remind him. The more he looked at this Shu son, the more worried he became. He didn't have much patience left and bluntly said to him, at the end of this case for you, it would be best if you mama is judged to be a fugitive slave, and you Shu is dismissed from her position and interrogated, right? Then this old man asks you, if you get what you want and avenge Yuanbua, how will you clean up the mess afterwards? Yin Zhorong was puzzled. This result couldn't be better, how will you clean up the mess? Idiot. Prime Minister Yin couldn't take it anymore and scolded, do you think that if you successfully impeached Messenger Miao Ling who can command the wind and rain, the emperor won't be angry? There's also a big point, do you think that the Celestial Commissioner is just a decoration? You haven't even thought of these consequences and you're scheming against a little girl, what do you want me to say about you? Yin Zhorong was dumbfounded by the scolding. Luckily he wasn't young anymore and his skin was thick enough. He shrunk his neck and carefully asked, then what should I do? If you had asked me earlier, I definitely wouldn't have let you and Wang Jiao work together to complain in front of the emperor. If you can't find anyone, go find him. That bastard is a hypocrite. Prime Minister Yin pointed at him unhappily. It's too late to say anything now, the emperor is already involved, this case has to be judged to be right and wrong. If you want to listen to me, then hide your petty thoughts and schemes and do what you should do. At that time, even if you win the case, you shouldn't take advantage of others and give them some leeway. It's best if you return the contract on the spot, let bygones be bygones and go back to where you came from. This way you'll be in the right, and you won't offend His Majesty, preserving the reputation of the Celestial Commissioner, and no one can say anything wrong about you. Yin Zhorong said in a muffled voice, wouldn't this be a waste of effort? Prime Minister Yin was so angry that he fell down. He had already said this much, but this bastard son was still stubborn. He really wanted to slap him in the face. If you really have the ability to seek revenge for your son, then you shouldn't have gone to that little girl who beat Yuanbua into a cripple. Wasn't it that brat from the Xue family? Go and settle the score with him. You don't have much ability, but you're good for showing off. Fine, this old man doesn't care, do what you want, just don't regret it in the future. Even if you regret it, don't expect this old man to care. A bastard son separated from the family, and was considered a side branch. Whether Yin Zhorong was good or bad, it wouldn't shake the foundation of the Yin family in court. Prime Minister Yin had always been open-minded, and wouldn't seek trouble for himself. Yin Zhorong was most afraid of his old father drawing a clear line between him and him. Even though he was unwilling, he still humbly apologized, please don't say that, your son wouldn't dare to not listen to you. You're right, this matter can't be too extreme, we have to leave some leeway. But what did Censor Wang say? This old man can only care about you, How can I care about other people? If he wants to be in the limelight, then let him be. I'm your father, am I also his father? Prime Minister Yin blew his beard and glared at him. Your son understands, don't worry, don't be angry, it's all my fault. Yin Zhorong apologized profusely. Seeing this, Prime Minister Yin's expression finally improved a little. Looking at his naive face, he thought of his other two disappointing sons and immediately sighed. This old man has been famous all my life, the only failure I have is that I didn't have a good son. You're like this, your eldest brother and third brother are both unreasonable, one is a bookworm, the other is a prodigal son. Take Shui Lingnan for example, this old man has fought with him for more than 10 years, in the end he only envied one thing, and that was that he used to have a brilliant eldest son. It's a pity, extreme wisdom will be hurt and geniuses will have a short life. Yin Zhorong just listened and did not interrupt. He and Shui Zhorong were of the same generation, and he had experienced the period of Shui Zhorong's fame. In Anling, everyone knew the Langjun of the Shui family. At the age of 18, Shui Zhorong was the Zhuangyuan, and even a 6-year-old child could recite the Ode to the Right Way fluently. With such a reputation, who in the world could be a rare modest gentleman? Prime Minister Yin was touched, and he was no longer in the mood to talk nonsense with the son of a concubine. Halfway through the journey, he drove Yin Zhorong out of the carriage, planning to turn around and find two old friends to drink to relieve boredom. So Yin Zhorong walked home on his two legs. When he returned to the assistant minister's mansion, Yin Zhorong was extremely tired, but Madame Yin stuck to him and kept asking questions. He was so annoyed that he just took a sip of tea and smashed the cup on the table. There's no end to it, is there? Madame Yin was startled and hid behind him. Only then did she notice that his expression was not good, so she softened her tone and asked carefully, "What's wrong? Did you fail?" Yin Zhorong said with a straight face. His Majesty ordered the 3 departments to jointly investigate and file a case. Madame Yin was delighted. Isn't this good news? That girl refused to go to court no matter what. Now she has no choice. Master, what are you worried about? Yin Zhorong told her what Prime Minister Yin taught him after he left the palace. Madame Yin's expression changed after hearing it. What do you mean by not going to the extreme? Didn't you tell father that they beat Yuanboi into a disabled person? Yuanboi is his grandson. You are just a woman, what do you know? Yin Zhorong said irritably. I thought that His Majesty was suspicious of the Shui family and that Messenger Miaoling couldn't get any benefits. I didn't know that as soon as Shui Rui came back to the capital, the wind changed. In the morning court session, everyone could see that His Majesty favored Yu Shu and wanted to protect her. What do you want me to do? If Prince Ning hadn't asked to supervise the trial, we might not have won the case. Madame Yin let out an ah, as if a bucket of cold water was poured on her face. She said helplessly, Then what should we do? Are we going to let them go so easily? Do you think I want to? Yin Zhorong said, but this is father's idea. What can I do? Madame Yin's eyes wandered. When she thought of her poor little son, she felt a burning pain in her heart. She couldn't give up and her mind was full of thoughts of revenge. Father only said that we should reconcile after the case is over and return Xiao Cui's slave contract after we win the case. He didn't say that we can't settle old scores with them before the trial. You mean? Madame Yin came close to him and whispered in his ear, Think about it. We have solid evidence in our hands and Prince Ning is supervising the trial. We have a 100% chance of winning the case. What can she do? We have to make her understand that once she loses the case, her mother will have to return to our mansion as a servant. She must try to save her mother. Father is right. We don't have to be ruthless. As long as she is willing to marry into our family and serve Yuanbo for the rest of her life, no one will make things difficult for her. Yin Zhorong was moved by what she said, but he hesitated. You dare to want such a powerful daughter-in-law? Madame Yin sneered. Why wouldn't I dare? As long as she marries into our family, I will be her mother-in-law. If she wants to force me again, I have 100 ways to deal with her. Seeing his expression waver, she added more fuel to the fire. Then again, that girl's skills are amazing. She can make the emperor happy and even father has a favorable impression of her. Once she becomes our family's daughter-in-law, the benefits won't be small. Yin Zhorong was soft-hearted. When he heard Madame Yin's words and Prime Minister Yin's words were not in conflict, his mind became active. The couple discussed and made a decision. They both felt that it was not too late. Madame Yin volunteered to see Yu Shu before the joint trial of the 3 departments. When Yu Shu returned to the Celestial Commissioner, she first went to Tai Shi Lu to thank her. She didn't ask about the dispute between her and Assistant Minister Yin's family and gave her a reassuring pill. You are one of the Celestial Commissioner's people. This seat will protect you. The joint trial of the 3 departments is rare. As long as you don't do anything wrong, no one can touch you. That was very powerful and domineering. Yushu wasn't worried that she would lose her position. The accusations that Imperial Censor Wang made against her were exaggerated and used to scare cowards. She was only worried that Ning Wang, the supervisor, was playing tricks on her. She couldn't prove that Aunt Chui had escaped from slavery. Just based on the evidence and witnesses in Yin Zhorong's hands, it would be disgusting if Aunt Chui was judged to be an escaped slave. What if the Yin family became angry and took Aunt Chui back to kill her to vent their anger? How could she explain to Xiaoxiu? Therefore in the evening she met with Shui Rui at Wang Jilu. The first thing she said was to ask him, "You are familiar with the laws. Is there any law that mentions that if the birth mother of an official of the court is a lowly person, what method is there to get her out of slavery?" Father Yu was a proper scholar, but Aunt Chui had been a servant to someone else. It wasn't rare for such a thing to happen in a large family. For example, when a servant girl gave birth to a son, the son would be raised to be a concubine of a yin-yang. Then when the son of a concubine became an official, the birth mother would naturally not be a lowly person. The only difference was that Aunt Chui gave birth to a daughter for Yu Xiucai and not a son for Assistant Minister Yin. Shui Rui looked at her worried expression and touched her small hand. It was ice cold. It was obvious that she had been on tenterhooks all day. He regretted not sending her back personally in the morning. At least he could have given her a definite message on the way back so that she would be at ease. "Sit down first." He led her to a bench and placed a cup of hot tea in her hands. "Don't worry. We won't lose this lawsuit." She was already planning her retreat. It was obvious that she didn't have a chance of winning. "Why won't we lose? You don't have to comfort me." Yushu didn't take his words seriously and said with a bitter expression, "I've asked my mother many times. She doesn't even remember that the Yin family didn't return her the slave contract. My father is also a muddle-headed person. He didn't even take her to the yamen to get rid of her slave registration and return to the village. Later, my mother became a concubine of the 3rd master of the Ji family. She can't explain it clearly. Now Yin Zhorong said that he has my mother's slave contract in his hands. If he dares to sue the emperor, there's an 80% chance that the contract is real. Just this one clause is enough to say that my mother is his family's slave." Shui Rui hid a smile in his eyes. He asked her, "Who told you that the slave contract in Yin Zhorong's hands is real? If it's not real, then how could it be fake?" Yushu said, "Even if it's fake, they can still pass it off as the real one. Who told my parents to be muddle-headed and give others something to use against them?" Shui Rui shook his head. He poked her forehead and said, "Silly girl. Your father isn't muddle-headed at all." Yushu finally felt that something was wrong. She stared at him suspiciously and said, "Why do you have a strange smell when you speak?" It was as if she knew something. Shui Rui said, "Where is there a strange smell? Why can't I smell it? Can you smell it again?" As he said that, he leaned toward her. His handsome face was almost touching hers. Yushu pushed his chest and said angrily, "I'm being serious. If you tease me again, I'll leave." Shui Rui sat up straight and put away his joking face. He got up and went to the study room next door. After a while, he came out with a small lacquer box in his hand. He showed it to her. Confused, Yushu opened the box to take a look. She saw a roll of paper inside the box. It was yellowed and had a rough edge. At a glance, she could tell that it was quite old. She was slightly stunned. She took it out and rolled it up in disbelief. After a quick glance, she was stunned. This is Aunt Chui's slave contract. Is this real or fake? There was a signature from both the master and the servant. There was also the seal of the yamen. No matter how she looked at it, it seemed to be real. "Of course it's true," Shui Rui said with certainty. "This contract of indenture was originally in the possession of a grand uncle of your Yu clan, and it was personally entrusted to him by your father all those years ago." Yushu's mind was in a mess. She carefully held the slave contract, afraid that she would crush it. Shui Rui's voice sounded in her ear. "At the beginning of October, the 9th prince invited me and Jing Chen to Hengwu Hall to watch a play. We happened to see Yin Yuanbo slandering you in public, so I captured him and brought him back to the Supreme Court. I tortured him and found out that his mother intended to marry you. After you refused, she plotted to harm you. In a fit of anger, I beat Yin Yuanbo until he was disabled. I wasn't worried that the Yin clan would seek revenge on me. I was only afraid that they would vent their anger on you. At that time I was prepared. To prevent them from making a fuss about your background, I secretly sent people to the south to Yang to look for your Yu clan. Gui Darren had just returned from Yang when he was sent out to investigate old matters. The first time he was unfamiliar, the second time he became familiar. This investigation really allowed him to uncover some incredible details. Shui Rui took a sip of his tea and continued, "Your father became a scholar at the age of 15, and this is very impressive in the local area. Even though your grandfather passed away at a young age, he was still a scholar when he was alive. Even your grandmother's maiden family was a country gentleman, and they were rather famous. For generations before your grandfather, the Yu clan had an ancestor who was a 6th-ranked official in the Celestial Commissioner's office. Later the Yu clan declined. During your grandfather's generation they moved from Janya to Yang. There were very few people left. Father Yu was the only son in 3 generations. He didn't visit his relatives often. Therefore when he died, Aunt Chui remarried and became a concubine. The news didn't reach the ears of the Yu clan. Otherwise, the Yu clan wouldn't have allowed her to do such evil things." Yu Shu was stunned. After a while she said, "You're not lying to me, right?" Shui Rui asked her, "Think about when you were young. Before your father died and before your mother remarried, your family didn't have to worry about food and clothing. Were you still considered wealthy?" Yu Shu was speechless. She wasn't the original, so how could she remember when she was young? She pretended to hold her head and thought about it. She said vaguely, "I don't remember clearly. When I could remember, my mother became a concubine in the Ji family. My younger brother and I lived in a rented house on the street. My mother sent money to us every month. That's why we didn't starve to death." This was true. Every time Yu Xiaoxiu had a nightmare she would talk about it. She was afraid that she would go back to the bitter days of eating rice and vegetables. Shui Rui felt sad. He thought back to when he first met her in Yang City. She was as skinny as a boy. She had a wild and shrewd temperament. She boldly came out to find work just to earn money to support her younger brother. In the past he felt that he had a lonely life. Until he met her he realized how lucky he was. His adoptive father treated him like his own son. He grew up in luxury. What was there to be discontented about? "It's fine if you don't remember clearly." Shui Rui took the indenture out of her hand and put it back in the lacquer box. He replaced it with a cup of hot tea and placed it in her palm. "I'll continue. Don't interrupt me. Listen to me first before you check." "Okay." "The people I sent to Yang found the Yu clan. They snuck into the ancestral hall and peeked at the genealogy. They discovered that you and Xiaoxiu's names were there, but your mother's name wasn't there. Thus they became suspicious." Guida flipped through the genealogy of the Yu clan. The next day he prepared a generous gift and paid a visit. He claimed that he was Yu Shu's servant. He brought the good news that she had entered the Dian High School and entered the court as an official. He spent a lot of effort to win people's trust. The elders of the clan were overjoyed and held a banquet to entertain Guida. One of the clan's uncles was especially enthusiastic. After getting drunk, under Guida's indirect questioning he spilled the beans. Shui Rui took a breath. Seeing that Yu Shu was listening attentively, she thought that he was telling a story. "What did I spill? Is it related to my mother's indenture?" Seeing that he had stopped, Yu Shu hurriedly asked. Shui Rui nodded, "That's right. More than 10 years ago your father brought your mother back to the village. Although he didn't marry her officially, he still held a banquet. After you were born, he found this uncle and secretly gave your mother's contract to him, asking him to take care of it." Yu Shu's father's original words were that Aunt Chui used to be a servant of a wealthy family. She had an illicit affair with him, so the master sent her to him. He received the indenture but didn't release her because he knew that Aunt Chui wasn't willing to follow him back to the village. He was afraid that she would have second thoughts in the future and harm her children, so he didn't release her. A servant naturally wouldn't be recorded in the Yu clan's genealogy. "So you're saying that my mother never got rid of her slave status?" Yu Shu was dumbfounded. "Yes, you can say that." Shui Rui was worried that she wouldn't be able to accept this reality, so in order to reassure her he said, "However, your father didn't remarry in his entire life. Now that you've made a name for yourself, you can openly write your mother into the Yu clan's genealogy book." How could he know that Yu Shu didn't care if Aunt Chui could enter the Yu family's genealogy? What she cared about was whether there was a way to release Aunt Chui from her slave status and prevent any future troubles. Now that she had the indenture, she didn't need to worry about anything. "This thing," she pointed at the yellowed scroll in the lacquer box, Did you steal it or rob it? Shui Rui coughed dryly. What do you mean by stealing or robbing? This was originally given to someone else by your father for safekeeping. He's no longer around, so what's the point of someone else holding onto your mother's indenture? Gueda only needed to use a few tricks to obtain the indenture. Even if that uncle found out that it was missing, he wouldn't say anything. He closed the lacquer box and placed it on her lap. He smiled calmly. Keep it well. When the 3 departments hold the trial, I will be present. I won't let you suffer any losses. Yu Shu held the small lacquer box and felt that Shui Rui had put a lot of thought into it. She couldn't even take care of things, but he had thought about it for her. Even if he was in a difficult situation, he wouldn't neglect her. She felt that she couldn't bear it. He had silently done so much for her, so what could she do for him? What's wrong? Shui Rui saw that she didn't look happy and instead revealed a confused expression, which made his heart inexplicably palpitate. Yu Shu blinked her eyes and returned to her senses, asking, since this is my mother's indenture, then the one in Yin Zhorong's hand is fake? That's right. Then I find it strange, she frowned. The Yin family has a fake indenture and still has the guts to report to the imperial court. Unless he's sure that we can't take out the real indenture, where does his confidence come from? Shui Rui's eyes flashed and his words were uncertain. Perhaps Yin Dengshi asked your mother in private, or perhaps your father did something in the past. I don't know. Yu Shu was speechless as she looked up at the sky. The image of her dead father in her heart suddenly became lofty. There was a saying that went, bad men deceive women for a while, good men deceive women for a lifetime. Chapter 737. 2-in-1. That night, when Yu Shu returned to the Fu, the first thing she did was to hide Aunt Chui's slave contract. This deadly thing couldn't be used now. After the joint trial of the 3 departments, she would go to the Yamen to completely remove Aunt Chui's slave status. She was impeached on the first day of court. When Yu Shu returned home, she didn't tell anyone. She didn't want them to be afraid and acted as if nothing had happened. The next morning, the family sat together to eat breakfast. Zhao Hui curiously asked her what the court was like. Yu Shu gave her a rough description. There are about 200 people. The emperor sits high up and all the civil and military officials have to stand in line. If anyone has something to report, they go up to report. There are also people bickering and quarreling. It's a mess. Zhao Hui said in surprise, who is so daring to quarrel in front of the emperor? Aren't they afraid of being beheaded? In the eyes of ordinary people, the emperor was the same as a man-eating monster. Yu Shu laughed and said, yes, I was shocked at first, but the emperor didn't get angry. It seems that this is a common thing. Zhao Hui and old Tai Tai he chatted for a while. He Fangji and Yu Xiaoxiu left early. Yu Shu didn't need to go out today. Yesterday she had told Jing Chen that she would rest for the next 2 days. In case someone from the 3 departments suddenly came to visit, she told him to run to Kunling Bureau frequently. Otherwise he couldn't find someone to make decisions. The date of the joint trial of the 3 departments was to be decided. Before the public trial, the Supreme Court, the Ministry of Justice, and the Imperial Censorate had the right to search for evidence and question the plaintiff and the defendant. However, they couldn't use torture or lock them up. They could only give evidence and confessions in court. Shui Rui had explained the steps of the joint trial of the 3 departments to her last night, so she could deal with it in an orderly manner. After breakfast, Yu Shu was ready to visit Aunt Chui and teach her what to say and what not to say in court. Considering how brainless Aunt Chui was, this task was a little difficult. As she expected, when she told her about the emperor's decree to hold a joint trial with 3 departments, Aunt Chui's hair stood on end. I'm not going to see the official. She panicked. Didn't you say that they have my contract? What if they take me back and lock me up? As she said that, she suddenly pointed at Yu Shu's nose and cried, you damn girl, are you deliberately trying to harm me? You have no conscience, I can see it from the beginning. You don't have the patience to provide for me, so you want to send me to be ordered around as a slave. You have such a vicious heart. Damn unfilial little bastard. Shut up. Yu Shu grabbed her arm and covered her mouth, interrupting her cursing. She pressed her down on the chair and stared at Yu Shu with a "you're cold-blooded, you're heartless" expression. Yu Shu's temples began to ache. If I was unfilial, would you have been able to eat and drink well and live until now? Yu Shu held back her anger and said, when the Ji family was destroyed, you were already harmed. If you keep yelling, I'll send you to the Yin family right now and let you see what it means to be unfilial. Aunt Chui was amenable to force but not coaxing. She was frightened by her and obediently listened to what she had to say. Even if you were a servant in the past, you're still my mother. I'm an official. If I'm unfilial, won't I be despised by the world? I'd be stupid to let you be someone else's servant. Don't worry, as long as you listen to me obediently, you'll still be the dignified Mrs. Yu. Yushu tried to frighten her and coax her. She repeatedly told her what to say when she met the official and repeatedly asked her several questions to make sure that she remembered. Only then did she stop. When she walked out of the east wing with a dry mouth and tongue, the sun was already shining on her head. Several maidservants and senior servants of Qingshi Temple were standing outside the wall. Xen was talking to them in an arrogant manner. When she saw Yushu coming out, she left them and quickly walked to her. She reported in a low voice, "This servant has already given them a warning. Do you have anything to say?" Yushu glanced at them and kept a distance. She said in a loud voice with a cold face, "There's been a lot of trouble in the estate recently. None of you should go out and keep your mouths shut. If anyone causes trouble and I find out, it won't be settled with just a beating." They all lowered their heads and said in unison, "This servant doesn't dare." Yushu nodded with satisfaction and left with Xena. Passing through the big garden, they were stopped halfway. In the front yard, Zhou who sent a little maidservant to learn how to speak. There was an uninvited guest at the door. The gatehouse doesn't allow people to enter at first. That servant told the gatehouse that their madam wants to discuss a matter of life and death with you. The person who came was Madame Yin Deng. When Zhou who heard the gatehouse's notice, he knew that it was an enemy who came, so he quickly asked someone to ask Yushu. A matter of life and death. Yushu said to herself and sneered. Although she didn't know the purpose of Madame Yin Deng's visit, she didn't come with good intentions. She wanted to see what trick she was playing. "Go to the front and tell Zhou who to let the madam wait outside the door. I'll go back to my room and change my clothes before going to see her." She sent the little maidservant away and went back to the north wing. She asked Bin Kue to make tea. She let down her hair and took off her boots. Lying on the chaise lounge, she enjoyed a set of tea art leisurely. She dawdled until the sun was high outside. Then she asked someone to comb her hair unhurriedly. Madame Yin Deng was left outside the door for a whole 2 hours. She asked someone to go in and inform the madam several times, but the reply she got was, "My young lady will come out soon. Please wait for a moment, madam." She was so angry that she wanted to leave, but she didn't want to delay business because of a moment of anger. "Stupid girl, when you marry into my family in the future, I'll tighten your skin." Madame Yin Deng scolded in her heart. Sitting in the sedan was stuffy, and it was not convenient to open the curtain to get some fresh air. In the midday sun, she was covered with a layer of sweat, which was very uncomfortable. If she didn't comfort herself like this, she would have left angrily. "Madam, the door is open." The maidservant of the assistant minister's residence lifted a corner of the curtain. Her fair face was red from the sun. She didn't complain, but she was like Madame Yin Deng in her heart, cursing the entire Yu residence. Madame Yin Deng tidied up her appearance and reservedly stretched out her hand to let the maidservant help her get off the sedan. She looked up and saw that the door was half open, but there wasn't even a greeting. She took a deep breath and didn't turn around. She walked step by step through the door. Just now, she saw a stocky steward with a delicate maidservant walking over and greeting her. "Madam has waited for a long time. My young lady is waiting in the garden. Please come in." The maidservant on the side smiled at her and turned sideways to lead the way. "Madam, this way." Madame Yin Deng always felt that these two servants were smiling with bad intentions. She frowned and coldly let the maidservant lead the way to the back garden. Yushu had meticulously arranged the large garden of the Yu residence into a treasured land of feng shui. Due to the wondrous sight of spring all year round, Shui Rui had named it the Perpetual Spring Garden. He had given her a plaque carved from green jade and hung it at the entrance. As soon as Madame Yin Deng entered the garden, she was secretly surprised. It was already the 12th month and it was going to snow soon. Outside, there were scenes of withered trees, but this garden was full of green and didn't show any signs of decline. After walking a few more steps, she felt a gentle and warm breeze caressing her face, as if it was spring, which made her even more surprised. Passing by the pond and the bamboo forest, she saw red-crowned cranes leisurely drinking water and koi fish jumping on the surface of the water. The ripples sparkled and mist rose. The scenery was very pleasing. The maidservant behind her was dazzled by the scenery and stood there in a daze. Liner, who was leading the way, turned around and saw the master and maidservant in a daze. She covered her mouth and laughed quickly. She reminded them in a sweet voice, "Madam, please follow closely." There are many 8 trigrams formations in this garden. If you accidentally get lost, you won't be able to get out. Madame Yin Deng suddenly came back to her senses and felt a bit embarrassed. She glared at her maidservant and resisted paying attention to the changing scenery around her. She walked forward with a cold face. After passing through a bamboo forest filled with mist, there was a glimmer of hope in front of them. She saw Yu Shu sitting in the pavilion with her hair disheveled and playing with the birds. Madame Yin Deng stood still and snorted coldly, "Miss Yu is too powerful. It's harder than ascending to the heavens to see you." Last time, it was Yu Shu who didn't send the marriage certificates to the families who were close to the assistant minister's residence, forcing Madame Yin Deng to come to plead for them. In the end, she was rejected, which made her angry for a few days. Yu Shu glanced at her and didn't say anything. She held a small plate of cooked egg yolk in her hand and fed it to the reindeer in the cage with the tip of a chopstick. This was the bonus from the treasure house last month. Pei Jing had made a fortune in the crystal business, so he specially found this fine product from the south for her to play with. Give it to me, please." The reindeer jumped up and down in amusement at the food in her hand. It was eloquent and had a southern accent. As soon as it opened its mouth, it made Yu Shu laugh. Madame Yin Deng saw that Yu Shu didn't take her seriously at all and talked to a feathered animal, so she was angry. She lifted the edge of her skirt and went to the pavilion. She sat down opposite Yu Shu and said with a long face, "Your elder is talking to you. Do you have no manners?" She was really raised by a servant. She didn't know the big picture. How could such a lowly person deserve to live in such a good garden? Yu Shu fed the egg yolk to the reindeer and said with drooping eyelids, "You're old and have a bad memory. So what? I said last time that if people respect me, I will respect them tenfold. A narrow-minded and vicious woman like you has the nerve to pretend to be an elder in front of me. You're really shameless." Shameless, shameless. The reindeer in the cage followed and tried to get another bite of egg yolk. Madame Yin Deng was humiliated by the person and the reindeer. She couldn't take a breath and her blood vessels shot up from her neck. In an instant, her face turned red and she forgot all the words she had prepared before coming. She slapped the stone table and didn't care about the pain. She just said angrily, "Stinky girl, how dare you talk to me like this? I think you don't care about your mother's life and death." With a clang sound, Yu Shu put down the small plate and it fell on the table. She looked coldly at Madame Yin Deng, who threatened her and said, "Is this the important matter of human life that you want to talk to me about?" Madame Yin Deng sneered, "What? Am I wrong? Your mother was a servant in the Yin family. If she didn't elope with someone, how could she live to this day? There might not even be a little B***th like you in this world. Do you think you can sit back and relax after asking for the grace of noble consort Shui to register your mother's household registration? Let me tell you, you're still too inexperienced. I've kept your mother's contract of slavery for many years. When we go to court with this evidence, she'll be my family's servant in life and my family's servant in death." If Yu Shu didn't know that Papa Yu had a trick up his sleeve before he died, seeing Madame Yin Deng's confident look, she would probably think twice in her heart. But the real indenture of Aunt Chui was now in her room. At this time, Madame Yin Deng's threat became a lame monkey show, which was funny and absurd. "Don't talk nonsense with me. What do you mean elope?" she said expressionlessly. "My mother has already told me everything. She used to work for old Madame Yin. Later, old Madame Yin sent her to you to be your master's maid. Out of jealousy, you plotted against my mother and my father. When it was revealed, you jumped out and pretended to be merciful. You betrothed my mother to my father and persuaded Yin Zhorong to let them leave the capital city and return to their hometown. My father is a scholar. How could he be so stupid that he didn't ask for my mother's indenture?" She pointed out the reason, but Madame Yin Deng was not ashamed. Instead, she scolded with a gloomy face, "What a shameless B***th. How could she say such shameful words to her daughter? Fortunately, I sent her away at that time. Otherwise, she would be a disaster sooner or later." Then she sneered at Yu Shu, "I was wondering why you dared to be stubborn with me. It turns out that you knew that the indenture in my hand was fake. Aha, you really won't shed tears until you see the coffin. I might as well tell you the truth so that you can give up." Yu Shu's eyes flashed and she pricked up her ears. She said so much nonsense just to get information from Madame Yin Deng and find out what was hidden in the indenture of the Yin family. "Your mother is an idiot. She had an indenture in the past and stored it with old Madame. Later, old Madame gave it to me. I hid it from your mother and only lied to her that once she entered our mansion, she would have to serve old master in the future. So, she couldn't be half-hearted and treat herself as old Madame's maid. In order to show her loyalty, she signed another indenture and sold herself to me. At that time your father hadn't come to the capital, so I kept this trick. I didn't expect it to be so useful. Madame Yin Deng smiled proudly. Your father is also an idiot. In order to let him take your mother away without worry, I gave your father the indenture she signed later. But he didn't have the guts to accept it. Instead, he went to my master behind my back and burned the indenture in front of him. He swore that he wouldn't leak the secret of him having an affair with my maid in order to escape. So, the indenture in my hand is definitely your mother's indenture. You don't have to take chances. Yu Shu was speechless, not because she was shocked by Madame Yin Deng, but because she knew that Papa Yu didn't burn the indenture that Madame Yin Deng gave him at all. So this was how Yu Xiaocai deceived Yin Zhorong and his wife to escape with Aunt Cui. This trick was like a cicada shedding its carapace, but it met with Madame Yin Deng's substitution. It was really hard to say who was smarter. However, now that she understood the cause and effect, it was even more interesting. Even if the two indentures were real, she could make the sinister husband and wife shoot themselves in the foot. Yu Shu was silent, and Madame Yin Deng mistakenly thought that she was timid. She followed up with another attack. This time, the joint trial of the three departments will be supervised by Ning Wang. Even if that boy from the Shui family helps you, so what? My master has real evidence that your mother will be judged as an escaped slave of my family. We will capture her and bring her back to the Yin family. Whether to beat or to kill, it will all depend on my decision. If something really happens to your mother, the word filial piety will make you unable to lift your head for the rest of your life and be ridiculed by the world. Yu Shu's face darkened and she asked her, "You told me so much just to make me afraid. What is your purpose? Just say it directly, don't beat around the bush." "It's good that you know to be afraid." Madame Yin Deng raised her slender eyebrows triumphantly and said, "Our Yin family is not unreasonable and will force you to the road of death. It is better to squash enmity than keep it alive. My master and I want to bury the hatchet with you, but it depends on whether you know what's good for you." Bury the hatchet? Yu Shu thought she heard wrong. The other actually came to ask for peace? "Yes, I will show you a way to live." Madame Yin Deng calmly stated her conditions. "As long as you are willing to marry my Yuanbua and become my daughter-in-law, I will spare you and your mother. When the joint trial of the three departments is over, I will give your mother's indenture to you and return her freedom." "You want me to marry Yin Yuanbua?" Yu Shu's voice involuntarily rose. Madame Yin Deng sneered and said, "Yes, I want you to marry my son. Serve her son for the rest of his life, and be a widow for him." Aha! Yu Shu seemed to have heard the biggest joke in the world and she laughed so hard that she staggered back and forth. She blurted out, "You fool. Do you think I don't know that Yin Yuanbua had his manhood broken and became a eunuch? You want me to marry him? You're talking in your dreams." Ha 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 ha. The reindeer also laughed like her and flapped its wings in the cage. Madame Yin Deng clenched her teeth, but she didn't curse. She snorted coldly and said, "Are you going to marry him or not?" The laughter stopped abruptly and Yu Shu said fiercely, "Only a ghost would marry that bastard." Madame Yin Deng clenched her fists. "I will ask you again, are you going to marry him or not?" "No, I won't." "Good." Madame Yin Deng rose to her feet angrily. She pointed at Yu Shu's forehead condescendingly and said, "I'll only give you one chance. It's you who chose to die. Don't regret it and beg me when you come to me." Madame Yin Deng was furious. Yu Shu's eyes were full of coldness and she grabbed Madame Yin Deng's wrist. She suddenly stood up from the stone bench and was half a head taller than Madame Yin Deng. She suddenly became aggressive. "My father was a scholar, and he had the ambition to serve the country, but his future was ruined by you, a vicious woman. He was alone, and he couldn't resist the power of your Yin family, so he had to give up the imperial examination and was forced to return to his hometown. 10 years of hard work were ruined in one day. He was unable to recover from this setback and died of depression. Come to think of it, you evil woman, and I have a feud of killing my father. I didn't go to the yamen to report you, but you came here to threaten me. I think you must be tired of living." Yu Shu's father became an official at the age of 15. Although he was not talented, he could be regarded as a real talent. He went to the capital to take the imperial examination. If he didn't live in Yin Zhorong's mansion, if he didn't get drugged by Madame Yin Deng and have an affair with Aunt Cui, and if his ambition didn't be ruined by reality, he might have had a bright future. If he was a heartless person, he would have abandoned concubine Cui and the child in her belly for the sake of his future, but he did not. Perhaps he was not a good husband, not a good father, but he was certainly a good person with a conscience. Do you believe that I will kill you now to avenge my father? Yu Shu grabbed Madame Yin Dang with one hand, grabbed the small plate with egg yolk in the other and knocked it on the stone table. She pinched the sharp porcelain piece and used it as a knife, and with a trace of scarlet blood on it, she raised it in front of Madame Yin's face. Her eyes showed a fierce glint and she looked like a bandit. Madame Yin Dang's face was pale and her eyes were full of fear. She kept leaning back but didn't dare to struggle for fear that Yu Shu would pounce on her and scratch her neck. Even if she accidentally scratched her face, it was not a joke. You have something to say. What are you doing? She turned her eyes and tried to call for help, but found that there was no one outside the pavilion. Even the personal maid she had brought with her was gone. It was like a trap deliberately designed to kill and kill. What am I doing? Yu Shu sneered and said, don't you want to force me to the road of death? Then I will drag you down with me first so that I won't be at a disadvantage. Anyway, I will avenge my father, and when I see him in the underworld, I will have an explanation. I said that out of anger. You can't take it seriously. Madame Yin Dang's legs were weak. She really thought that Yu Shu wanted to kill her, so she didn't dare to argue with her. You can't take it seriously. Then what you said just now, were you joking with me? Yu Shu's pupils were extremely black, and the whites of her eyes were extremely white. Being stared at by her coldly, Madame Yin Dang felt as if she was being stared at by a poisonous snake. She was terrified and didn't dare to move. Yes, I was joking with you. She followed Yu Shu's meaning and forced a smile, revealing her nature of bullying the weak and fearing the strong. It was unbearable to look at. Yu Shu suddenly laughed. She loosened her hand and let go of Madame Yin Dang. She threw away the porcelain knife, winked at her and said naughtily, I was also joking with you. As she said, she raised her hand and licked her cut finger, making a soft tut sound. Madame Yin Dang trembled all over and was about to go crazy because of her. Her lips turned blue and she might faint at any time. At this time, the reindeer came to make fun of her again and shouted at the top of its voice, Idiot, idiot. It heard what Madame Yin Dang said to Yu Shu's parents just now, so it used what it learned. Madame Yin Dang was so angry that her heart and lungs were about to explode. Her whole body was so dry that she felt dizzy and then she passed out. With a plop sound, Yu Shu saw her eyes turn white and pass out. Yu Shu squatted down and put her hand under her nose. She was relieved to find that she was still breathing. It was good that she was not dead. Come on, she shouted, find 2 strong old maids and throw her out. Forget it. Carry her out. As soon as she finished speaking, Exina came with 2 strong old maids and carried the unconscious Madame Yin Dang away. Yu Shu followed him out and saw Zhou Hu in the front courtyard. She instructed him, go make a trip and see that the person is escorted back to the assistant minister's Fu. Help me tell that old fellow Yin Zhorong that I told him to look after his stupid wife and not jump around in front of me again. This time she's still breathing, but next time she might not be able to. After saying that, she shook her sleeves, put on her thick cotton shoes, and went back to her room to catch up on sleep with her hair hanging down. When she was far away, Zhou Hu winked at Exiner and asked in a low voice with a strange expression, Miss, why did you knock her out? Exiner secretly rolled her eyes. What nonsense are you talking about? It was obviously warm in the garden and Madame Yin was wearing thick clothes. She fainted because of the heat after walking a few steps. It has nothing to do with you. She didn't knock her out. She was so angry that she passed out. She had learned a lot. But she couldn't tell others about this. Otherwise, how could she marry someone with such a bad temper? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.